Hey everybody, and welcome to my Redguard class video for the Jaws of the Lion character from the DLC in Gloomhaven Digital, but also the standalone Jaws of the Lion board game. This has got to be one of my most requested guides, I think, from the new characters. People seem to really enjoy this character. Lots of diverse different build options, certainly a very interesting one that a lot of people have got their own opinions on. Lots of nice little sneaky tricks this character gets along the way as well, which I quite like, leading to a lot of ways to approach scenarios in different ways. So yeah, very interesting character, and this one's going to be a good one. A big thank you to all of my supporters on Twitch and on Patreon. The Patreon names coming up on screen now. I really appreciate it. And a big thank you to Mike Kira for the legendary support. I really appreciate it, dude. Thank you. And of course, the mandatory shout out for the Twitch channel, twitch.tv/mandatoryquest. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Sunday, I'm streaming Gloomhaven, talking Gloomhaven, just hanging out, having a good time. So come hang out. If you've got any questions, you can always ask me live. All right, this one's a doozy. Let's get into the Redguard. So the Redguard, the tanky frontliner of the Jaws of the Lion crew, definitely a jack of all trades kind of character. Quite unique because it is a kind of tanky character, but also has a lot of ranged attacks, particularly with his sort of sickle and chain that he has. Being able to pull enemies towards him, immobilize them, keep them within reach is quite a unique mechanic, really. Most kind of melee tanky type characters usually are melee based in most of their attacks, and although the Redguard does have some good melee attacks, it's certainly very versatile across ranged attacks too, giving you a lot of range in terms of being able to deal with enemies that are difficult, but also just being able to give you a lot of versatility in the damage that you do, which means that you can kind of adapt very nicely to any situation that really comes up. Compared to most of the characters in the Jaws of the Lion, I think like the Redguard is the one that I've been requested for a guide the most. And I think that's because he is a strong, firm fan favorite, really, just because of all of the different kind of versatility this character has and different options for building it out. You can certainly go for a all-in tanky build using that shield spikes, which is something that I've been doing a lot of on my deadly playthrough, but also you've got plenty of really good damage options. You've also got good healing options, you've got good control options, so this character can be very self-sufficient. And in terms of if you're playing two-player, I think this character is excellent because you're always going to have something that you can bring in, and you're just going to be able to combo off pretty much with every character that you kind of come across with. Very versatile, very open character, isn't going to have any struggles comboing with anybody, really. Let's get into the starting cards. So we have Swift Strength as our first card. You can see all of the cards highlighted that I would recommend as your sort of starting build, but I felt like this is definitely a character where you can swap a few of these around, and we'll talk about that when we get to them. So the top of Swift Strength is attack 2, range 2, target 2, pull 1, 16 initiative, and the bottom is move 2, jump, and shield 1. So nice little versatile card here. You've got a decent attack on the top here, being able to target 2 things for attack 2. That's decent value. The pull 1 might give you some sort of play around with some traps as well, which is quite nice. The range 2 is a little bit harsh on this, I will say. This character does have quite a lot of range 2 attacks, and range 2 is always that one where you always just quite struggle to get it, and certainly to get 2 targets at range 2, it will make it a bit harder for you to be able to achieve that. The initiative though, 16, is very good. Well, I will say right now, this character does not struggle with early initiatives compared to all of the different mercenaries in Jaws of the Lion. This character gets the earliest initiatives and the most of them as well, so always has the opportunity to go early, and this is another great example of that. The bottom though is really where I really like this card. Move 2, jump, shield 1. I like to play shield spikes, and we'll get into shield spikes in a couple of cards time, but this being able to just position yourself where you want to be, get over those obstacles, get over those traps, get over those enemies to get right into that spot that you want, and then shield up, ready to do some tanking for your team. The other important thing is that of course you can add boots to this to make it quite a large movement. This character definitely wants to use something like boots of striding or weathered boots if you're playing in the tabletop version, to be able to move as much as possible using this jump action, because there's a lot of obstacles in Jaws of the Lion. There's a lot of difficult terrain, there's traps everywhere, you know, the rooms are quite tight sometimes, so jump really is very premium, especially when you're on a character like this who really wants to get up in people's faces and do that tanking and make sure to draw the focus for your team. So yeah, very good start to that. I think that's a really good card, and Swift Strength is a card that we will be using for a very long time, and we might even consider, if we're playing with enhancements, to enhance the bottom on the shield here. I think that's a very good enhancement to get to. Next up, we have Healing Sands, which is heal for self, 1 XP on the top. Very nice little heal there. 32 initiative, sorry. And then the bottom is a move 3. All attacks targeting you gain a disadvantage this round. So the top is actually a really good sizable heal. You know, heal 4 is a very good amount. 1 XP and it's a non-burn. So a nice reusable heal here. And as somebody who is going to often be the focus of attacks, if you're going to be tanking, or if you're just sort of, even if you're not tanking, you're probably going to be putting yourself in harm's way a lot of the time. So I felt like Healing Sands top is just really, really good. Of course, not as versatile as a targeted heal, so that you could maybe help an ally out, but really you're probably going to be the one soaking a lot of damage, so that's kind of excusable. The bottom of this card, though, I think is also sneakily very, very powerful. The move 3 is a decent amount of movement there, but the all attacks targeting you gain disadvantage this round is very powerful, because what that will allow you to do is go up to perhaps a ranged enemy, and then that will stop them from moving away, enabling you to be able to use your retaliate on your shield spikes, which we'll get into. A lot of the play with this character is giving enemies disadvantage or immobilizing them to stop them from being able to move away from you, or discouraging them from being able to move away from you in order for you to get your retaliate triggers. So the bottom of this card is a very good early tool in order to do that, specifically when you are dealing with ranged enemies. It is also kind of nice to do it to melee enemies, just to try and mitigate the amount of damage, of course, that you may take in a round. So it's kind of like it's tanking, but it's maybe not as obvious tanking as a card that has shield written on it, but you are kind of tanking here, because hopefully if you get targeted a bunch in that round, it's really going to pay off and you'll end up taking a lot less damage than if the enemy was just attacking normally. So yeah, Healing Sands, this is a card that I sometimes drop. This isn't a card that I always play with, to be honest, mostly because I like to experiment a little bit more with the damage dealing cards, and this character, you definitely have to make a bit of a decision sometimes. Hey, do I want to be a little bit more of a tanking kind of like frontliner, like a role player for my team, or do I want to get a bit spicy with some attacks? And Healing Sands is a good example of a very safe card that I think you're playing on. If you're kind of newer to the game and you're maybe not as experienced with playing, and maybe you're struggling, I think Healing Sands is just a great all-round card that helps fill a role for you, and you're not going to be sad to see it, and it's going to help you out a bunch. So it's a very safe card to take, but maybe not the most exciting in the world, and we'll get into some ones that we could maybe swap in for this if we wanted to do that. Next we have Shield Spike. So one of the hallmark cards of one of the builds for this character. Shield Spikes is one of those cards where if you're building your red guard to be an all-in tank, you absolutely want it. If you're playing your character to be more of a damage dealer, you may not consider using it, or you may decide to go to a sort of a 50-50, like a bit of a halfway house. Definitely have the flexibility with this character to still use Shield Spikes and then maybe get some shield on future turns. So the top of this says Retaliate X, where X is your current shield value. Self, 2 XP, and it is a permanent effect. So basically what this says is that every time you now gain shield, you will also gain retaliate of equal value, right? So get shield 2, you now kind of have retaliate 2. It's essentially how this is working, right? And this works with items that you can get that can give you extra shield. It works with the cards that give you shield. It works with allies granting you extra shield through their ability cards that they play. There are lots of ways to get additional shield, and some of the items that are in Jaws of the Lion, of course, like the armor, for example, will give you a shield for the entire round. So that kind of gives you shield 1 and retaliate 1 for the entire round. I think it's chain mail, I think it is. I forget the name off the top of my head, but that item, that's why it's so good with this character, is because you play that early in the round and you're going to get retaliate 1 out of it. So a lot of our play with shield spikes is going to come down to getting a very high amount of shield in a single turn to hopefully have all of the enemies adjacent to us, or at least they can't move away from us, and then do a bunch of retaliate damage across the scenario. So you can go all in like that, try and really maximize a big shield spikes turn in which you play shield spikes early on in the scenario. You kind of play a little bit of shield here and there, and then when you have your good opportunity, you use something like Swift Strength to jump into the middle of the enemies. Maybe you immobilize them all with some of the future cards that we've got coming up here, like Warrior of the Sun, and then you're going to go all in on your kind of shield on the next turn. You know, something like the bottom here of Shield of the Desert. Give yourself a crazy amount of shield to then do a bunch of damage to the enemy, and hopefully soak all of that damage too at the same time, which is a very powerful swing and dynamic in the game. If you could basically stop all of the enemies from doing any damage and you do 3 or 4 damage back to them, that's a very good trade right there. So yeah, shield spikes, it's a hallmark of one of the builds of this character, and I said this is probably the build that I'm going to lean towards with this guide. We will go across all of the damage stuff, but I really enjoy shield spikes. I think it's a very interesting way to play the game. I think it's quite rewarding, and I feel like I want to play this character as a bit more of a tanky type character. There are loads and loads of great damage dealing characters in Gloomhaven, so I feel like this is the unique thing that the Red Guard has, so I want to exploit that and I want to play around with that more so than just being a good value damage dealing machine. But we will of course talk about those kinds of things as well. The bottom is heal 2 range 2, which is create fire as well, and elements very important. I feel like this bottom is actually pretty usable in a pinch, and in certain scenarios where I don't end up playing shield spikes maybe immediately because it's just not necessary or it doesn't suit the scenario very well to just go hard on shield spikes very early on. And having a card that just gives you a little heal and creates fire to maybe even an ally if needed is actually pretty usable. And you always want your heals on the bottom of your cards, really, because that will give you the ability to still attack if you want to. So if you wanted to hunker down somewhere and you wanted to attack somebody at range, you could still heal and maybe do a ranged attack at the same time on your top action. So yeah, very good. So shield spikes, slam dunk. This is going to be a corner card of our build here. It's going to be the centerpiece, really, actually, of our build for this guide, but we will of course be touching on everything as we usually do. Next up we have Flaming Sickle, which is attack 3, range 2, pull 1, create fire, 63 initiative, and all adjacent enemies suffer 1 damage, loot 1, create fire. So you've got a versatile double generator of fire here. So both the top and the bottom do generate the fire element for us, which is good. That makes this a very versatile card. It means we don't necessarily are forced into maybe playing the top or bottom just to get an element. You know, we have a bit of flexibility of how we can play this. So the top being an attack 3, that range 2 again is a little bit annoying sometimes, but as you can see, you got the pull and the fire on there, which I think does make it kind of, yeah, that does make it a good value attack. If it was just attack 3 range 2, I would say that's probably a little bit below the curve of what you would hope for, but with that pull 1 and that fire, that definitely brings this back up again to being quite a strong effect, and being able to give you an element for future turn or potentially an ally maybe later on that round if you were going to time it correctly is very good. And of course the pull into a trap is also incredibly powerful if you can get it, and there are plenty of traps in Jaws of the Lion for you to abuse with something like this. The bottom though I think is usually what I end up playing this for, funnily enough, which is just all adjacent enemies suffer 1 damage, loot 1, and create fire. This is very good at dealing with high shield enemies because, of course, this is just straight pure damage. It goes through any kind of shields. It avoids attacking in any way, so it avoids retaliate. If an enemy has retaliate against you, completely avoids that. Completely avoids the shield values that the enemies have. So it can be a very, very clean and easy way of you dealing with some troublesome enemies and finishing some enemies off without having to run that risk of drawing your miss modifier, right? Especially at level 1 when your attack modifier deck is pretty rubbish. It is quite nice to just have some guaranteed way here of finishing an enemy off. Of course, you will actually have to be next to the enemies, so you're going to have to be in a position before you play this card, which can sometimes make it a little bit awkward, but I feel like I do quite often play the bottom of this card, and that works out well for me. So the loot 1 as well is a nice little bit of extra juice there. If you kill something with that 1 damage, you can immediately loot the gold that it drops behind, right? So that's really nice as well. Gives you some instant loot and means you don't have to stop and move onto that hex on the next turn just to get that loot of that enemy that you just killed. So it's a bit of looting efficiency going on there too, which I quite like. Next card we have is Blinding Sickle, which is attack 3, range 2 with Immobilize and create light on the top. On the bottom is all adjacent enemies suffer 1 damage, loot 1, which is the mirror of the Flaming Sickle. So we've got 2 different sickles here, Blinding and Flaming Sickle. They do very similar things on the bottom. The top is slightly different here though. You've got attack 3, range 2, and Immobilize and create light. So bit of a different thing here. The Immobilize here is quite nice for obviously stopping melee enemies from potentially attacking you. But if you are playing more of a shield spikes build, which is where you quite often actually want to get hit because you want people to take that damage, you may actually just use the immobilize as a way of preventing ranged enemies from running away from you, in order to give them disadvantage, and then they would have to also take the shield spikes damage. So something to consider here is that immobilize on this character, you're not looking at immobilize in maybe the same way as you may be looking at immobilize on different characters, and that's purely because shield spikes is such a powerful effect if you can continually use it, and being able to stop enemies from running away when they pull a ranged attack to avoid your retaliate can be very annoying. So yeah, immobilize is almost used in a more aggressive way than it usually is used across most other characters, where it's usually pretty defensive. So that's worth kind of saying here. Initiative between these two, 63 and 87. I don't think there's too much in it really here, except for the fact that 87 does usually mean that you can go last, or you can go very late in initiative, which is sometimes preferable. So 87 is the better initiative than the 63, definitely, because it's a bit more usable. 63 is still too close to middle order, whereas 87 is, you know, comfortably late. So hopefully you'll be able to go late. I feel like these two cards are obviously incredibly similar, but they do have a purpose here, creating the two different elements, and you definitely want to be using these early to be able to get those elements and start using them with your other cards. Next up, we have Twirling Stabs, a card that doesn't quite make it here in my recommended starting cards, but really barely, to be honest. I actually run this quite often instead of Healing Sands, because I like to play a bit more of an aggressive role with this character, and I feel like this gives you some more damage potential. And if, to be honest, you've got your healing covered by your allies and they're being able to supply you with heals, especially if you're playing solo. But when you're playing solo, you can really kind of choose one character to be a hard support, and that is their role. And I usually end up doing that. So having like a Void Warden, for example, have them as being, right, you are a hard support. You're going to focus mainly on controlling the enemies, healing us up, making sure that we're in good positions, you know, and just supporting the rest of the team, really, and not being the star of the show. That can be a little bit boring, though, when you're in a multiplayer situation, when they want to play with all of the fun cards that do more damage or have more interesting effects, right? So it really depends. I feel like if you're playing solo, then you could potentially get rid of Healing Sands here and go for something like Twirling Stabs, and you could kind of go all in, or potentially some of these other cards that we will come to. But for me, it doesn't quite make out here, because I'm going to come at this from the perspective that maybe we're playing a multiplayer game and we want to just have good success. And I feel like Healing Sands is a bit more of a safer pick. But the top of this is attack 2, target all adjacent enemies, consume light to add +1 attack and 1 XP. So attack 3, attack a bunch of stuff, is very, very good. Unfortunately, at level 1, you do have a pretty poor modifier deck, and Redguard isn't somebody who really gets much strengthen, if at all. You are going to have to ask your allies to do that for you, you know, strengthen you up. You're not really going to ever have the ability to strengthen yourself. So that's always a little bit awkward with this character, I've found. But certainly this combos really, really well with the Warhammer. So if you've been playing the Brute or the Cragheart, those characters you'll know have really good combos with both Trample and Unstable Upheaval. With Warhammer, and Twirling Stabs is no different. You've got another great card here that will do wonders with that kind of thing. So worth considering. However, that is a 2-slot hand item, so that would mean you're giving up maybe on potential shielding items later on down the line if you're playing in digital. So bear that in mind. Like, there's more kind of shielding options obviously available in the hand slots, so you've got to decide what kind of route you want to go for. But definitely very, very powerful. And to be honest, I feel like if I was going to go do that, then Healing Sands would be the card I would drop here to try and do that. The bottom here is attack 2, consume fire with wound. 38 initiative on this card too, not particularly great. As I said, this character doesn't struggle with initiatives. You have great control over early, middle, late. You can kind of pick where you want to go a lot of the time. In fact, sometimes I find that we actually can only go early. You got to be a bit careful sometimes that you take too many early initiative cards, and then your allies want you to go after them, and you just can't, because you've just got so many early initiatives. So something like this is a usable initiative for us when we need to have a little bit more control over it, but unlikely to be our leading initiative a lot of the time. The attack 2 wound on the bottom here is quite nice, because of course it's flipping that dynamic of having a move on the bottom and attack on the top traditionally. Now we've got an attack on the bottom of this card, which usually means that we can double attack in a turn, potentially make some extra use out of some poison, for example. So if the enemy was poisoned, we can get that +1 from the poison with the bottom attack here, and then we can also get another a top attack and get the benefit from the poison again. So these kinds of effects generally work very well with buffs, or they work very well with strengthen, or they work really, really well with poison, right? So one to take a look at. So Twirling Stabs for me, I do really, really like this card. And to be honest, I think I would probably play it over Healing Sands. In fact, I think on Deadly, I did play it over Healing Sands to begin with. But Healing Sands, I think, ultimately is the safer card to play. Yeah, if you want to have reasonable success and be self-sufficient, I think Healing Sands is maybe just a little bit better. Next up, we have Flame Shroud. So this is the next 5 times an enemy enters a hex adjacent to you, that enemy suffers 2 damage. That's on the top. Create fire and potential 2 XP there. The bottom is a move 4. Consume fire to get shield 1 and 1 XP. This is all on 6 initiative. So Flame Shroud is a excellent card, top to bottom. Really, really good. The top, I haven't found myself personally playing with a lot. I think that the value of the bottom is really, really high, especially if you're playing shield spikes. I mean, it does exactly what you want to do, move and shield. That's all you really want to do when you're playing shield spikes. So it works really, really well. Of course, you have to have that fire though, but it works well. The top though is very interesting with all of the pull abilities that your character has, because of course you can always just activate this and then on a future turn pull some enemies towards you using things like the top of Swift Strength to be able to trigger this off really, really nicely. It's not something that I've personally had a lot of experience playing with, but it is certainly a kind of viable thing for you to do, and I feel like it is actually pretty effective at dealing a good amount of damage to enemies. 2 damage through shield is always going to be really nice, so being able to finish off some high shield enemies quickly could be really a really good benefit here. So Flame Shroud is one of those cards where for me I think it does a lot for either of the builds that you're going to be playing. If you're playing a sort of tanking build, and even if you're not playing a full-on shield spikes build, you're still going to get great value out of that move 4 on 6 initiative, even if you don't really care about the shield. So Flame Shroud is just an instant pick card because it's so premium in terms of what the card does and the initiative that it does it. Every class is going to take an initiative 6 move 4 pretty much regardless of what it is that it does. But this also does happen to have shield on it, which helps us a lot with our shield spikes. And the top actually is maybe a kind of mid to late game burn if you're not playing shield spikes, where you can get some value with a lot of your pulls. So if you're going for a bit more of a damage pulling build, then Flame Shroud's also very effective at the top. Shocking Advance is next. Attack 3, Immobilize. Consume light to get shield 1 and 1 XP. It's a round long effect. 14 initiative, and the bottom is move 3, Create Light. Now this card is just a slam dunk for me as a level 1 card. I think move 3, Create an Element is just something that is very, very underrated. It doesn't seem great, but just being able to have a very, very simple setup for light for the next turn is really good. Of course, really you want to be probably using the top of this card with the light, because attack 3 Immobilize with a shield is going to be really, really nice. Say that Immobilize, and this being a melee attack means that you're probably going to move up to an enemy. You're going to attack them for 3 Immobilize, stop them from running away if they're ranged, shield up, and then hopefully do some additional damage through your shield spikes. The top of this is really, really good early game in just getting damage on the target, shielding up, stopping them from being able to really hurt you, and stopping those ranged enemies from running away. It's really good. Shocking Advance, I think pretty much every build will be playing this card, because I feel like just a move 3 Create Light is going to be usable regardless of what it is you're trying to do most of the time, especially at low levels. Next is Shield of the Desert, which is attack 3, Consume Fire to do a sort of 2 hex little AoE pattern in front of you. So changes it from a single target attack to a double target attack, really, with that little pattern there. You've also got Consume Light to add +1 attack to that and +1 push for 1 XP. So in theory, this could be attack 4 on 2 things with a push. And that's pretty damn good, right? That's 8 damage, really, and a very effective way of dealing with some enemies, mopping them up, and a very, very efficient attack, really, for level 1. There is a bit of setup here. You're going to have both the fire and the light, and having both of those things together can be a little bit tricky. You know, you're really looking at having to play something like Blinding Sickle Bottom and Flaming Sickle Top in a single turn, which does work quite well, right? You can pull somebody in maybe with Flaming Sickle here with the attack 3, and then at the bottom of Burning Sickle you can just do 1 damage to them and then potentially loot them if they die, and then you've also got your infuse element on the bottom here. So it is fairly easy to pull off, but sometimes I find with this character you kind of always end up wanting to move, and then perhaps a card like this isn't able to do. So I will say that although you do absolutely have the ability to get a powered up Shield of the Desert, I found myself usually just getting the attack 3 on 2 things most of the time. That seems to be where I end up with this, and maybe that's also because this build kind of generally favors fire more than it does light as we go on. But I felt like that's yeah, it's definitely possible for you to do, but you're going to have to be very, very specific about it because you haven't really got many other ways of doing it. I guess you could use Shocking Advance bottom if you like, and Flaming Sickle top is another way of doing it. But yeah, the rest of it is not really looking too great. You've got a few other ways, I guess. Warrior of the Sun potentially with Flaming Sickle bottom, but you are really going to have to work for it with the plan of knowing that Shield of the Desert is my next turn, right? Like next turn I want to have both elements and I want to do Shield of the Desert top. So it does take a little bit of planning, but very, very powerful card and worth the planning. Absolutely. 10 initiative is great as well. Makes this playable as just a move 2 if you want. That's always something that you should consider whenever you've got low initiatives. Can they also just be used as move 2s? You know, will this character benefit from just having this initiative? And yeah, 10 is a usable move 2 initiative for sure. The bottom is Shield 3, create fire and light, 1 XP, and as a round long effect. Now this is the big shield spikes turn for your character. If you do really want to go all in on it, then this is it. This is what you want, right? You want to be able to get that shield value up to hopefully something like 4 or 5 really is I guess where you want to be, and then hopefully do that 4 or 5 damage to 3-4 kind of enemies. That would be really good value for a burn, because then you're going to be looking at not only you sort of deflecting an entire round, so it's almost like you've stunned the enemies, right? Because you've kind of deflected and controlled enemies because there's no damage being done to you for that kind of round, and you've managed to reflect all of that damage back. So it's a huge swing, like I was saying before, and this is definitely the key piece in that, and you're going to have to plan around doing this. So usually what I end up doing if I'm playing with the Void Warden's got a great card, Signs of the Void, which allows you to grant a move action to an ally and give them shield 1. So it works really, really well on the turn where you want to do this. But also you have a couple of other options. Like quite often you'd use something like Swift Strength to kind of jump in on the previous turn, shield up, maybe do you know, a little bit of extra shielding or something with Warrior of the Sun. To be honest, you probably want to use something like Warrior of the Sun with Desert Knight, with Shield of the Desert. You know, mobilizing enemies so that they can't run away from you might be quite important. So definitely have to kind of tailor this as to what enemy you're facing, right? If you're facing a load of melee enemies and they don't have any ranged cards in their deck at all, they can't draw any abilities that are ranged, then you know that you can pretty safely just drop this and not really worry about what the top is. However, if you know that those enemies do have some ranged attacks, and there are a lot of enemies with ranged attacks in Jaws of the Lion, then realistically it's probably looking like Shield of the Desert bottom, Warrior of the Sun top to stop them from being able to move away. So previous turn, Swift Strength in, perhaps use something like just some other kind of bit of shield, or perhaps just use something like Blinding Sickle or Flaming Sickle, whatever it is that you need to do, right? Or maybe even Shocking Advance, however you want to go about it. But on the next turn, you go straight into your Shield Desert and your Warrior of the Sun. That gives you Shield 4, immobilizes everything around you on 10 initiative. Really, really good. Stops them from moving away, and you'll have a great Shield Spikes turn. But like I said, if you're using the Void Warden, Signs of the Void is also a way that you can kind of shortcut this process a little bit. But definitely look for opportunities for the big bottom burn of this. Next up, we have Desert Knight, which is attack to disarm, target 1 enemy within 2 hexes, create ice and dark. It's 90 initiative, and the bottom is move 6 jump for 1 XP. So this is like a kind of I think this is like an odd card sometimes with this character that I find is obviously very useful. I'm never going to turn down a card that says attack 2 disarm on it, especially when it says target 1 enemy within 2 hexes as well. We don't even actually need to, it's a melee attack, but it's not a melee attack, right? It's a bit funky, but it gives you that extra range, so you don't necessarily have to worry about not being able to position yourself completely correctly, which is always quite nice. But the 90 initiative makes this a very, very playable as just a go late card. Like if you really want to just go late. And also if you did want to kind of burn a big flurry of cards, if you were thinking, all right, I'm going to burn a bunch of cards right now, going on 90 initiative, doing your move 6 jump to get yourself into the position to be able to do your Shield of the Desert bottom and your Warrior of the Sun top isn't half bad either. So this card, I think, is actually very versatile for this character. You've got late initiative, which sometimes is going to be needed. Sometimes you just want that. You've got a great disarm on the top here, although sometimes a little bit counterintuitive with shield spikes, right? Probably don't want to be disarming an enemy if you have a bunch of shield, but generally speaking, disarming is always going to be useful at certain points during the scenario. And then you've got the move 6 jump on the bottom for when you really want to position yourself for a great future turn. The 2 elements that it generates here, ice and dark, are not ones that this character uses, but they are ones that the Void Warden uses a lot. So she will love you for playing this card, absolutely love you for playing this card. So I would definitely consider playing this if you do have a Void Warden in your party, because it will help her out a bunch. Last of our cards that I am recommending taking as your starting hand is Warrior of the Sun, which is shield 1, immobilize, target all adjacent enemies, create light. This is a round effect. 13 initiative, and the bottom is attack 2, consume light to get +1 attack, muddle, and 1 XP. So a very versatile card, kind of similar actually to, what was it, bottom of Twirling Stabs. So you got an attack 2 on the bottom of Twirling Stabs, and potentially you got an attack 2 on the bottom here. This one is potentially an attack 3 with muddle, which is potentially a little bit worse than what you've got with the attack 2 and wound, of course, because wound could potentially do lots of future damage, but muddle can also be very useful here because it's sort of like pseudo immobilize, right? Thing to remember with shield spikes and retaliate, and this is very important to remember, the rules of the game are very specific, and I feel like if you're playing on digital, this rule may kind of fly under the radar a little bit. But if an enemy has a source of disadvantage already, they will not move away to avoid disadvantage, right? So if you have a way to give an enemy disadvantage, so let's say muddle, or potentially you have something like the bottom of Healing Sands, it is disadvantage. There are also armor items that characters can get, like leather armor, which give disadvantage to attacking enemies. If a enemy has a source of disadvantage already, then they will not move to try and avoid it, right? So if you have a ranged enemy and they're attacking me right now, they're attacking the red guard, and I have the bottom of Healing Sands active this round, and they're adjacent to me right now, even if they draw a move ability, they will not move away, because moving away wouldn't do them any good because they would still have that disadvantage. So this is something that I think sometimes doesn't come across very well in the rules, but it's very key here to playing the shield retaliate build of this character very, very well. And I feel like something like Warrior of the Sun here with the immobilize on the top as well, this card is designed around giving that disadvantage to ranged enemies, and also just stopping them from even potentially positioning themselves to maybe get better like target 2s as well, right? Because enemies will maybe move around if they have a target 2 or if they have some sort of AoE attack, because they're going to try and maximize targets if possible. So things like immobilize also stop them from doing shenanigans like that, because even if they do have disadvantage, they would still move if they could maybe get that second target from their target 2, right? That's just something that I wanted to like really address here in the front section with all of the cards as we discuss them, because it's something that maybe if you're playing digital and you don't have a deeper understanding of what it is that the monsters do and why they do it, it's really important to understand here that if the enemy has a source of disadvantage already because of a round-based effect, or because of an armor item that you're wearing, or just because of muddle, then they won't actually move away, because there's no benefit to them. They wouldn't lose disadvantage by moving away, right? So worth considering. So Warrior of the Sun, 13 initiative. I really like this card. I think this is great in the Shield Spikes build, and it's a role player in the Shield Spikes build for sure. And the bottom is a nice value attack if you want to get it off, but I generally find myself playing the top of this card. 13 initiative 2, very, very important for this kind of thing, right? To be able to shield up and immobilize, shield up early in the round for sure is what you want to be doing. Next, we have Blade Dance, which is attack 1, range 3, consume fire, +1 attack, pull 2, 1 XP, move 2, attack 1, range 3, consume light to get +1 attack, pull 2 again. So 2 different elements here, 2 separate attacks and a move sandwiched in between. I actually quite like the top of Blade Dance. I think that if you can get kind of all of this, or even if you can get most of this, so let's say you could just get the fire or you could just get the light, I think it's actually pretty decent. My only concern with this is like you're constantly fighting for elements, and I feel like you make a lot of elements, but also you really want to consume elements in a very specific way. So I don't know. I've just found Blade Dance to be a little bit awkward. Like I found it in my hand in a round where I don't have either of the elements up, so it looks very underwhelming. It's just an attack 1, range 3, and a move 2, attack 1, range 3. Also at low levels, like I said, you're not a character that particularly gets strengthen unless others are giving strengthen to you. So you're probably going to, you know, it's unlikely that this is suddenly going to turn into some mega attack. Although the pulls on this obviously are going to be quite good for traps. And if you can get the fire and get the light up and move to a good position with a bottom card and then Blade Dance and pull 2 enemies into 2 traps, that's actually going to feel like really good value. So Blade Dance is one of those cards where it's kind of like, I would say it's a bit more of an advanced card, hence why it's an X. I guess most of the X cards are advanced cards, supposedly. So I feel like it is a bit more of an advanced card on trying to execute these 2 elements together. Like I said, you have got a few ways of doing it right, but also I feel like if you do get those 2 elements together, sometimes just doing a big Shield of the Desert just feels a bit better. So it's yeah, it kind of barely misses out, and I have flirted with it and I have played with it a reasonable amount, and I don't think it's necessarily bad. I just find that sometimes it just ends up in my hand and I don't have either of the elements, and it's sort of very mediocre, and it doesn't really have any redeeming feature on the bottom or with the initiative here. 29 initiative means that I can't even just use it as a move 2 when I don't have those elements, right? And the bottom is a burn, so it's move 4, jump. All enemies move through suffer 1 damage. Consume light, 2 damage instead, which is actually not bad for a burn effect, really. If you add some boots onto this, right, you could potentially make this like a move 5 with weathered shoes or weather boots, or 6 with boots of striding. You're suddenly actually potentially, if you could do this to like 4 enemies, that's 8 damage. Probably worth a burn, or it's getting very close because it's 8 pure damage through shields, no sort of retaliate back to you either. So that is actually pretty decent. So I don't mind the bottom of Blade Dance as a one-time effect, just to kind of do a little bit of damage, finish a couple of enemies off, and get you into a good position. So I actually don't feel like this character has too many like unplayable cards across the board. This character has quite a nice mix of cards, and they all have their uses in different ways. So yeah, Blade Dance just narrowly misses out though. Next we have Precision Strike, which is attack 4, add +3 attack if the target has a negative condition. Consume fire to gain advantage on that attack, 1 XP for that, and 1 XP just for playing the card. So potentially we could have 2 XP here. We could be attacking for 7 with advantage, which is obviously quite nice, but only if the target has a negative condition already. So we're assuming wound here, probably, maybe immobilized from some of our other cards that we've played, but probably fairly unlikely that we would be immobilized. We'd go for poison maybe. So there's things you can do, but I guess this is ultimately quite weak for a burn attack. Just in general, it's only 7 damage. With advantage means that sure, you probably won't miss, but at low levels you've still got a very good chance of drawing a -2 and a -1. You know, and then that wouldn't be a particularly great attack. Or you could even just draw your miss and your -2, right? And then that would also be a pretty underwhelming attack. So I feel like this is a little bit too much for a burn on a character who has cards that they do want to burn, potentially like shield spikes, right? Like you want to burn shield spikes early on in the scenario to get the value as the scenario goes on. So having a card like this, maybe in a pinch right at the very end, maybe it's pretty underwhelming in total. 40 initiative, slap bang in the middle, really. I dislike an initiative like this. It's pretty unplayable. You're never going to use this as a leading initiative. You're never going to choose 40 as your initiative in the game. So yeah, it's basically unusable. The bottom, move 2, pull 2, range 3. I find like this is probably the redeeming factor of this card. Being able to move, pull an enemy within range 3, closer towards you, even through a trap, and then maybe even attack something else and pull that closer. That does work quite well. Also combos quite nicely with some of these awkward range 2s that you have, because then of course you can pull something that's range 3 away and pull it into range. Can be quite a nice way of you getting 2 targets on swift strength, because of course you could go 16 initiative here, do your move 2, pull an enemy into range 2 of the other one, and then you got your 2 targets, hopefully range 2 from yourself. So there's some nice little things you can do with precision strike, but I think in general this card, if we, the top is underwhelming in general, and I feel like the bottom it's usable, definitely, and there are some cool things you can do with it, and there'll be some certain scenario setups where you'll just be like, oh, this is crazy, I can just run over here and I can pull this enemy. So it might be a kind of card that you might consider in your sideboard for a very specific scenario, because it could lead to explosive openings, potentially, or explosive kind of just general results in different scenarios. But I felt like overall, if I was just to take this on an average scenario, I'd be disappointed. So that's why it's hitting the bench. Okay, so I will put up on screen now all of my chosen cards in the board game format. So if you are playing the physical Jaws of the Lion game, you can pause the video here, and if you want to take a screenshot or whatever of all of the starting cards. So here you go. Okay then, let's get into the level ups. Okay, so I've jumped over to Guildmaster mode for us to be able to do these level ups. Unfortunately, we have to start at level 2, and I can't have changed the starting cards. So bear in mind that the cards on the left at the moment don't reflect the actual starting cards that I have chosen in the previous segment. But let's go into the 2 cards we get at level 2. So we get Harvest Sickle, which is attack for range 2 earth and light, and it's 52 initiative, and the bottom is move 5, loot each hex you enter with this movement. So this is quite nice. I feel like with a card like this, it's a very good all-rounder card. Attack 4 range 2 is just solid. It's nothing like super exciting, right? But it's very, very solid attack. And this early on in the game, you're certainly going to do some good damage to it and kill enemies very quickly if you start doing a lot of attack 4s. The create earth is not really something that you care about, but can help the demolitionist very, very much. But the light is something that you care about, so that's quite nice. You kind of like create an element for your buddy, the demo, and then you also kind of create light for yourself. And this is something, this character is quite underrated in this aspect, actually. They do have quite a nice suite of ways to go early and then just make elements for their team and be a bit of a team player, which is why I feel like this character is the only one maybe out of all of the starters where if you say I want to play 2-player, I would really say somebody play the Red Guard and then maybe fit another character around that, because you just can't go wrong with the Red Guard. Because a card like this is not particularly glamorous, but it's going to do good damage. If you're struggling to kill enemies quick enough, this is going to do some great damage, and it's going to empower yourself and potentially an ally that you're playing with, right? So really, really good. The bottom, move 5, loot each hex you enter with this movement. It's just a really nice clean up the scenario card. Right at the very end, when you're about to win, you just run around, hoover up all of that loot that you've got left off on the ground, get yourself 1 XP. And I feel like that's pretty fair for this card. It's not something that you're going to do, in room 1, and please do not do this in room 1. Even if there is like 4 piles of loot that you could potentially hoover up with this in the first room, please don't do that. Please just try and move on to those loot piles and maybe loot a little bit more naturally as you go, rather than doing this. This should really be a final room, run around and pick up those last bits of loot type cards. So yeah, 52 initiative though is useless, so this will have to be paired with either an early or a late card, depending on what it is you want to do. The other card is Barbaric Instincts. Now this card is the card that I quite like at this level. So it's shield 1 at the top, and it's pull 1, range 2. All adjacent enemies suffer 1 damage. Create fire, and it's a round based effect, of course, because of that shield 1. You've got 12 initiative here, so really good early initiative. So going to be needed on those shields anyway, but it's kind of to be expected. If a card says shield 1 on it, it should really have a very nice early initiative. So nothing too surprising there, I guess, if you consider the ability that it has. The bottom is consume light to get a move 2, or we just attack 1 with wound, right? So we do have a move 2 potentially, and then an attack 1 with a wound at the end of it, or we can just do an attack 1 with wound. I generally find myself to be only playing the top of Barbaric Instincts. I feel like the bottom is actually pretty decent. You know, of course, being able to attack an enemy and then moving on to the next enemy and attacking them and getting the damage started with that wound is quite nice. But I feel like the top of Barbaric Instincts is really where the power level is. Being able to get your shield up, ready for your shield spikes, right? You want to keep that retaliate damage incoming. That's really good. Being able to pull potentially an enemy either through a trap if you're very good with your clever positioning, or just pull them closer to be able to get this adjacent enemies suffer 1 damage type clause. So it's quite nice. Obviously, it's not really doing loads of damage here. You know, we're not talking about kind of doing crazy amounts, but in terms of if you want to play this character as a tank, this is a very good role player type card. Really good early game tanking card, because you're just going to move in with something like Swift Strength, and then you're going to use like Barbaric Instincts to just sort of pull those enemies a little bit closer, get that shield up, do a little bit of damage, and you're on shield 2 already, and that's going to be pretty good, because that's going to be 2 retaliate damage through shield spikes, and then potentially may consider using items, or maybe another character can give you some shield like the Void Warden. So yeah, Barbaric Instincts top, I think, is good. The bottom, I don't really use too much, but as an individual ability, I think it is pretty decent. Getting wound on something is always going to be quite nice. So if you do want to play a bit more of an aggressive build, then the bottom of this card's probably where you're at, because you're going to be able to move and attack, and that works quite nicely. I feel like if you are playing a damage-based kind of red guard, then you've got a bit of a tough decision here. I think probably you're ultimately going to come down on Harvest Sickle, just because it's a very easy attack to kind of do. But if you can consistently make that light and just get a move to attack 1 wound a lot, then actually it's not too bad, aside from you having maybe a bit of a bad deck at this point at only level 2. So yeah, the choice for me is pretty clear here, because I'm going to be going for a shield spikesy type build with this video. However, Harvest Sickle is actually a very good role player card and is actually decent value. So if you are going for more of a damage build and you want to fuel up some fellow allies that can really make use of that, so perhaps if you're even playing 2-player and you're playing just Red Guard Demolitionist, you might actually consider just playing Harvest Sickle here, because it makes the element for the demo and she's going to love you for it, and then you make your own element and you can have a powerful turn next turn too. So yeah, I think like that might be the pick at 2-player here if you're playing with the demo. I think I'm going to pick Barbaric Instincts though, because we're going for shield spikes. So the card we're going to get rid of here with Barbaric Instincts is going to be Blinding Sickle. We're going to focus a bit more on making sure we have fire in this build. Some of our future picks are going to really need fire to really kind of be fully useful for us, and they're going to be very good. We also need to make sure that we have fire for the bottom of Flame Shroud, because we really want to be using this as a move for shield 1 as often as possible. You've also got Shield of the Desert, and I feel like the fire consumption here is the kind of better consumption most of the time, of course. Sometimes not if you've only got 1 enemy, but a lot of the time the top with the fire is a bit better. So I feel like we need to be focusing on making sure we have fire. So we'll be getting rid of Blinding Sickle here, but realistically I think you keep this whichever sickle here that really better aligns with the elements that you're using. So if you are going to be using maybe light a bit more, then maybe you get rid of Flaming Sickle here. So that's going to come down to your kind of personal preferences on which elements you like to use and for what cards. But for us, because we're going to be focusing more on the fire consumes, we're going to get rid of Blinding Sickle here and bring in Barbaric Instincts. Okay, on to level 3. At level 3, we have Warmth of the Sun and we have Strangling Chain. So a tale of 2 halves, really, this one. Yeah, we got one card that's not so good and we got one card that is very good. So let's go for the not so good one first. Warmth of the Sun. So attack 3, consume light to get +1 attack and muddle. So potentially attack 4 with muddle. And you've got this kind of cone AoE in front of us. So potentially up to 5 enemies here and 2 XP. So there's a lot of damage that could potentially be done here. You're looking at 20 damage plus obviously your modifier draws. So there's some potential here for a decent amount of damage, but I do feel like this is a little bit Magical Christmas Land, this particular one. I don't know what it is, just my experience in Gloomhaven in general. I have found that kind of cone-based attacks that use these kind of cone patterns here in front of you generally don't tend to work out. I don't know what it is, but just doesn't seem to work out for me. Maybe it's just the way that I play, or it's very hard to kind of get that kind of choke point with enemies in this position, because naturally the enemy is going to want to try and kind of move around you, right? They're going to try and find somewhere to attack, and they can't attack you from those 3 hexes at the back there, unless of course they're ranged, but generally speaking they won't be able to attack you, so they're going to start to try and move towards you. I just don't feel like it happens naturally. So maybe being able to hit 3 enemies here is really where you're probably at, and that's still 12 damage, which I guess is kind of okay, but for a burn card it's maybe a bit underwhelming. It's a bit much to invest into something like that, so not a huge fan of the top of Warmth of the Sun. 23 initiative is okay, pretty good, usable for sure. The bottom, heal 4, range 1 with light. Now that is actually a very decent heal. It's a good upgrade to what Healing Sands was doing, because now we actually have it on the bottom rather than the top, which instantly makes it a bit more playable because you don't have to give up a top attack action in order to heal, so that always makes these heals better. You've also got range on it, so in theory you could target some ally that is next to you if you really needed to or wanted to, and it creates an element for us, light, so a very good upgrade to Healing Sands here. I do feel like the bottom of this card is where it's at. That would be what I would be considering playing the card for, and sometimes people get confused a little bit with healing and tanking here, with isn't healing also tanking, which it kind of is, but this character, when they're tanking, specifically wants to build shield to get retaliate going on shield spikes. Like, I don't feel like this character, when played as just a without shield spikes, just as a normal tank, I think then when you go down that route, which is absolutely possible, then I feel like you're more kind of focused on doing damage as well. So I don't feel like a card like this is even great too, especially when you've got a choice here at level 3 of another card which is amazing. So Warmth of the Sun, and I think, yes, the bottom is actually pretty decent. It's actually quite good, but I don't think it saves the card, especially when you look at your other level 3, which is a Strangling Chain. Attack 3, Immobilize. Each time the target is attacked this round, it suffers 1 damage. Consume Fire to do 2 damage instead and get 1 XP. So this should get you pretty excited about killing bosses very quickly. It should also get you excited about any of the bottom attacks that you might have already, because of course we can start to get some good use out of this immediately. So do 3 damage to the enemy, immobilize them so they can't run away from you, and then they're going to take either 1 or maybe 2 damage every subsequent attack after that. Really good with summons, really good with multiple attacks. Like I've said before, you've got a couple bottom attacks yourself here, right, on Warrior of the Sun and on the bottom of Twirling Stabs, but you've also got characters like the Demolitionist, who has a lot of little attacks that they do. So 1-2 punch from level 1 is just extra attacks, right? So it would trigger every single time. Also works really well with poison, of course, because that's going to encourage you to get them poisoned as well. We're going to do extra damage that way. So yeah, Strangling Chain is a very unique effect. Remember, this is a round long effect, so you do lose the card. It does go sort of on the enemy, if you like. It goes into your active area, and then the token is kind of like on the enemy, right? So it is worth noting that, because a couple of times I've forgotten that and tried to stamina potion back Strangling Chain mid scenario, and yeah, mid sort of round, and it's not worked. So bear that in mind. Strangling Chain, you do have to leave it out there. You can't just stamina potion it back and use it immediately again. So yeah, just something to be wary of in digital with the timing of all of that. The bottom is also actually a really good effect too. Move 4 and then immobilize all adjacent enemies, targeting all adjacent enemies. So this is kind of like it's like maybe not an upgrade, but like a side grade, I guess, to Healing Sands here, right? Because Healing Sands has a move 3. All attacks targeting you gain disadvantage. That could be better in some respects, because even enemies that are really far away from you will still have disadvantage if they're doing a big long range attack against you, right? So it still has a little bit more to it. I think it's probably a bit safer, but you've got an additional movement here, and then you've got that immobilize, which is basically doing the similar kind of thing. So Healing Sands is, I would say, maybe a little bit better in this respect, like a little bit better, but maybe the extra move is what you want, and also immobilize can do probably about 90% of what the bottom of this card does most of the time. So for me at level 3, it's a really simple choice here. You've got a very clear-cut winner between these two cards. Strangling Chain is excellent, and everybody should play with it. So it's Strangling Chain. So as I alluded to before, I feel like the card we should take out here will be Healing Sands. I do think that still this card has its uses with the top heal, and if you're a player who doesn't have a support character, and hopefully a support character who's maybe leveled up a little bit themselves, so now maybe has a few bigger heals. I'm looking at you, Void Warden, so perhaps you might not have those, but if you do have a Void Warden in your party or some other support character who's doing a lot of healing, then I feel like you can easily get rid of healing sands here, and they'll just have to help you out. You'll be their problem. They'll have to help you out and support you with that healing, because I feel like the rest of everything else that we have here is pretty tight in our game plan right now, so we'll drop healing sands here. Okay, on to level 4. So at level 4, we have Radiant Sickle and we have Burn Away the Dark. So Radiant Sickle is attack 4, range 2. All enemies adjacent to the target suffer 1 damage, create light, 79 initiative, and the bottom is move 2, heal 2, range 2. So pretty decent little heal on the bottom there, actually. I feel like this card is actually fairly decent, except when maybe you compare it against some other cards that we will kit. Like some of these cards here at the level up stages, especially considering the last level 2, like Warmth of the Sun, this is not a bad card by any means. I would say it's a little bit worse than Massive Boulder on the Cragheart. Massive Boulder on the Cragheart was attack 3, range 3. All enemies adjacent to the target suffer 1 damage, or all allies and enemies. So this is slightly less harsh on your allies, and also that created earth, and this creates light. So it's a very, very similar effect, except for the fact that this is a little bit more damage but less range, which I do actually think hurts this effect somewhat, because sometimes the perfect kind of target for this will be something that's a little bit too far away from you, but it will be surrounded by enemies. So I do feel like the lack of range on this does make it a bit weaker than Massive Boulder, despite the fact that it has a little bit more damage, and despite the fact it doesn't have the ally damage kind of downside to it. The bottom is move 2, heal 2, range 2, as we said, is actually a really usable heal, because you're just going to be moving through the scenario, and you're often just going to want to move. Sometimes you're just going to want to have to move too, and this gives you a bit of extra value when you do that. So this is the kinds of heals that I really like, because it doesn't upset my turn too much. I know that I'm going to want to move 2 at some point. I'll be quite happy to just play this as a move 2, heal 2, and get that extra little value. So I like these kinds of heals, because it's really not forcing me to choose to do damage or heal. It's like, no, you can move and you can heal. You've got it, right? And that makes it so much more playable than something like the bottom of Warmth of the Sun, right? Because even though this is a heal 4, the fact that this has just got a little move on it, and it's got that heal too, like little and often with heals. That's what I'm all about. Little and often. Remove wound when you get it as quick as possible. Heal little and often. Remove poison little and often. Big heals like this will just get blocked by a poison, right? Whereas if you just move 2, remove that poison, you're feeling pretty good about yourself. So, it's just a little bit of extra value that you got there. So definitely really like the bottom heal here. 79 initiative on this card as well. It's a decent late initiative. It's not super late, but it is decent. So I feel like this is also a kind of character that will be looking to pick up some of these later initiatives along the way, because you have so many good early initiatives that you get that actually you do need to mix in a couple of late initiatives here and there. So that's always worth kind of keeping an eye on, because I have got myself into trouble with my initiative before, where I've got so many early initiatives that I just can't go after my allies when I really, really want to sometimes. So Burn Away the Dark, I feel like is a bit of a better card. This is the top is a bit underwhelming. The bottom is very usable, but I feel like this is actually a slam dunk kind of card, and it's got all of my favorite words written on the top of this pretty much. Attack 1, target all enemies within 2 hexes, consume fire to add wound to that attack. And that is a melee attack, folks. So that can be combined with Warhammer. That's right. So Twirling Stabs has now been upgraded massively here to have an extra circle area of influence, if you like. That wound as well that you can do, it's going to be so good if you combine it with stun. Usually you'd have to pay for an enhancement for this kind of thing, but being able to use wound and stun together guarantees you 2 points of wound damage, because of course you'll stun the enemy, then they're going to take a point of wound damage, and then the stun is removed, and then on their following turn they're going to take a point of wound damage before they even act. So it's 2 guaranteed points of damage with that wound, and that is superb. So yeah, I really like Burn Away the Dark. I think it's an excellent combo with Warhammer. And although Warhammer is not an item that I think this character rushes out and buys immediately, because I feel like you need your boots, you need your armor, you need your iron helm. There are certain things that you need to buy, your stamina potions, your health potions. You know, there are requirements that this character has before Warhammer. But hopefully by the time you're getting to around about level 4, you've managed to kind of got a bit of savings building up here, and maybe you have some money in the bank to be able to buy this, because it's going to be really, really good when you do. And yeah, you can be you can have a hugely impactful turn with the top of Burn Away the Dark, and I'm a big fan of that. The bottom of this card as well is just super premium as well. Move to disarm target one adjacent enemy, consume ice to create fire, consume dark to create light. So a bit of kind of element filtering here, being able to get your elements that you like to use. Those filtering things I think are a bit of a side element to the character. You can of course generate both of those elements with the top of Desert Knight, so you've got potentially a complete filter if you really wanted to. But realistically, you might use it to take away an element from a particular dodgy enemy. That's the way that I would probably end up seeing it, because the other elements do have use for other characters maybe in your party. So I don't feel like the filtering of elements here really comes into play. I would absolutely just play this as a move to disarm and be incredibly happy with it all the time. So Burn Away the Dark, you've got a very good combo player top, and once you've kind of burned that combo, it can transition into a really good just move to disarm they're going to be super happy about anyway. So yeah, for me, this is a fairly easy pick, because I very much have tendencies that lean towards the top of Burn Away the Dark with Warhammer, one of my favorite items, one of my favorite combos with the Crag Heart and with the Brew, and it's just something that I really enjoy playing with. So Burn Away the Dark is a really easy pick for me. So the card we're going to be getting rid of here is Shocking Advance for Burn Away the Dark. The reason for this is that we're definitely going for a more of a flame build than we are for a light build. Although we will have light up occasionally, I do feel like sometimes we won't be doing this, and we may just end up using this as a move 3 make light, and we don't really have a great use for the light. We have a couple of small uses for it, but Warrior of the Sun often is a top for us. The bottom here is not played too much. Barbaric Instincts, sometimes we might use the bottom of this, that could come in, but again, it's more of a top action. So realistically, Burn Away the Dark is coming in to replace this move 3 create element with a move to disarm, which is very good. I do think as well, Desert Knight is a card that you can potentially start to target as something to go away if you don't really want it. I am very cautious, as I said before though, about going too early on all of your initiatives and not having one late initiative that you can play around. And Desert Knight is basically a guaranteed go last most of the time, and that's really good sometimes. So I have a tendency to want to leave Desert Knight in at this point in time, but I do feel like if you really wanted to and you wanted to keep going a little bit more with the light, you could leave Shocking Advance in and you could actually get rid of Desert Knight, because you've kind of replaced the disarm effect a little bit with the bottom of this. Okay, so we are going to go into level 5s, which means spoiler territory, folks. So if you are watching this and you have not got past level 5 in your physical Gloomhaven campaign, in digital as well potentially, but you might not care so much about digital, but certainly in physical, this is spoiler territory. We will be talking about things that are in envelopes and in packages that are opened through the legacy elements of the game. So this is your spoiler warning as we go into level 5. Turn off now if you don't want those spoilers. Okay, level 5. So the unique thing with Jaws of the Lion characters is that they only have one level 5, which was always accompanied by like a new mini that you managed to open and you get out of a box, which is really cool. So for this particular character, we have the card Sand Devil. So we only have one choice, so of course we're going to be taking Sand Devil, and but this card does prompt quite a lot of discussion, so we will go through Sand Devil because this card is very interesting and it functions in a weird way that's quite hard to get your head around sometimes, and the little tricky things that you can do with this is actually really clever and can be very useful, and you can feel pretty smart sometimes with some plays you can pull off with this. So Sand Devil is place the Sand Devil in an adjacent empty hex. It is considered a trap for the purposes of monster focusing and movement. At the start of each of your turns, you may move it up to 2 hexes, and you may force any character on it to move with it. Anytime a character moves onto it, or vice versa, not when moving together, that character suffers 1 damage and gains muddle. 2 XP, and this is a permanent sort of thing that comes out, right? So it's a trap, basically, with unlimited health. So this thing cannot die. It's like a summon, but it's considered to be a trap, but it cannot die. It cannot be like triggered and then it's gone, whatever. But this is a very, very unique thing. This little kind of mini sandstorm that's kind of moving around the board, and you get to move it however you want, which is really, really cool. And essentially it can start to affect both you and and the enemies in quite big ways. So there are 2 kind of key parts of this, on why it's good and how it can be used, and the different ways that it can be used. It's quite complicated, and I'll try and explain it as best I can, because this is the kind of card that once you start playing with, you're like, what the hell is this doing? And then you kind of start things start to click as you start to play, and you start to see interesting situations where you can use it. So the best use of this can be that you can now never have to move on the red card. In a way, you could put the Sand Devil under yourself, and then you could use the Sand Devil as a free move 2, carrying you as much as you like throughout the scenario, which is kind of cool. Just never having to play a bottom as a move again could be quite cool. And you have lots of bottom attacks or heals, and some of the cards that I was talking about earlier that maybe I was giving you a little bit of a hard time to, like Warmth of the Sun, for example, I actually feel like now potentially you're like, well, I don't need to move, so something like this actually has a lot of value if you intend to play in that way, right? So there's kind of there's an interesting way of playing there. Now, moving 2 each turn is probably not going to be enough movement. I will say that. I do like you at some points you're going to have to want to move like 4 or more. So it's not always going to work, but it's a very cool way of playing. And certainly if you can just make it work, on the odd few turns here or there, to allow you to just go, all in on some of these sort of bottom attacks that you have here, or even like bring in Twirling Stabs and go for that. Just go for all of the things that aren't actually move abilities on the bottom. It's kind of fun to mess around with. So that's one application of this that I've seen people use, and I've used a little bit. Personally, I feel like that way of using it is quite cute and it's fun, but I don't feel like it's going to be, super powerful. Like for me personally, I like to have a lot of control over my movement. So, I'd try to avoid enemies and things like that as much as possible if I need to, and try and get to specific locations. And yeah, I feel like just having the move 2 is not really going to do it. A few other sort of applications of this, as it is a trap, enemies will try to avoid it. So this can be a nice way for you to force enemies to take really long routes through different kind of rooms and things, blocking stuff off so that they either have to move through it or they have to go around it, which takes them a very long time. So that's always quite nice. The muddle effect and the 1 damage is not huge, but certainly over the course of a scenario it can add up. And because this thing moves around with you and it doesn't die, it will stay around for the whole scenario. The problem being though is that as it only moves 2, it could be left behind. So that's something that's kind of worth mentioning and considering. But as a means for blocking up different routes for enemies, it can be pretty efficient and can force enemies to take weird paths and more beneficial paths for you. Absolutely. The other thing that I've seen people do is I've seen people put it in doorways and just let enemies walk through it. Just constantly leave it in a doorway, open a door, run away, and then stick the Sand Devil in the door. And as the enemy has to move through that hex to get to you, they will just move through it and take some damage, which is also kind of a unique thing to do. So that is something else you can do. I've also seen people put this on an enemy and just try and force the enemy through traps as well, right? Because you can just move them around. So it's pretty interesting to just move the enemy into traps, or move them away from certain locations, or move them onto hazardous terrain, right? Or whatever. Like there's some really kind of cutey things you can do with that. So that's another kind of third application that I've seen with it. Really, I mean, there's probably loads more applications of how you can use Sand Devil. It's really quite a flexible and interesting little effect that you can do. You can help up your allies, of course, and move them around. Bear in mind that you only take the 1 damage and the model the turn that it kind of moves onto you, or, you know, if it ever moves on top of you or you move on top of it. Once you are on the top of it and you choose to move with it, you won't be taking any more damage or models. So, you know, that whole kind of never having to move again type strategy, you can do that with an ally potentially, and then get them to move forward and use that, as long as you don't mind them, you know, they don't mind taking 1 damage and being muddled for a turn. So there's so many like cute and weird little things that you can do with Sand Devil that aren't really apparent maybe at the start, and certainly I haven't seen all of the different applications for it. I haven't managed to make it super good. I've had a couple of scenarios where it's been very decent. I've had some scenarios where it's been completely useless, so take that as you will. I feel Sand Devil is just fun, and it's always cool to try and make it work, but I don't feel like it is necessarily always the best card, and I don't always necessarily think you want to just burn it on the first turn and just force the issue with it. But yeah, it is certainly it's certainly a very fun effect to play around with. The bottom is move 5, so just a very solid amount of movement. 55 initiative is obviously garbage if you wanted to actually play this as a move 5, and you probably will end up playing it as a move 5 for at least maybe 1 rest cycle, I would think, and then maybe you play the Sand Devil after that, maybe in the second room or something like that. Because if you play the Sand Devil too early on, it's not going to be able to get to, not going to be able to keep up with you, maybe. So yeah, worth considering. But Sand Devil, you have to pick it at level 5. It's very interesting. It's probably the most interesting of all of the level 5s, I would say, because it opens up so many weird possible kind of gameplay implications, which the other cards, some of the other ones do. So the Void Wardens does slightly, and obviously the Demolitionists does slightly as well. Opens up a few different kind of play possibilities with her. But in terms of like just really weird stuff you can do on the board, I think Sand Devil takes the biscuit. So yeah, Sand Devil, very interesting, and an interesting and exciting card to play with. So the card we're going to be getting rid of for Sand Devil is going to be Desert Knight. Fairly kind of simple swap here. We will miss the 90 initiative and of course the disarm, especially on higher levels of difficulty. You may find that losing this disarm really hurts you bad, so that is worth considering. But if you are playing on lower levels of difficulty, I think you'll be okay without it. We kind of replaced the move 6 jump here with a reusable move 5, so that's a burn, of course, and this being reusable, so that's a pretty good trade there, I think. Then of course you've got the big burn top potentially for whenever you want to do it. I will say that if you are not playing shield spikes, then you may consider actually just getting rid of shield spikes entirely and running something like Sand Devil instead. So if your aim is not to play a shield spikes build, then I feel like absolutely you will not be running this card, so therefore something like the keeping Desert Knight in or something like that is going to be there. So this guide video is heavily leaning towards using shield spikes and with some just good value attacks mixed in as well. But I think it's always worth sort of saying here that I know a lot of people don't actually play with shield spikes, so this card wouldn't even be here at this time. So or you probably would have swapped it out much earlier. You might have played it at level 1 maybe, or level 2, but I imagine you probably would have gotten rid of it pretty quick. So yeah, always worth mentioning. But Sand Devil is now with us, and we now have some other interesting things we can now do. Okay, on to level 6. At level 6, we have Fierce Brilliance and we have Flying Sickle. So Fierce Brilliance is the next 4 times an enemy enters a hex adjacent to you, that enemy gains Disarm. Has 4 charges, 2 XP on offer there, and it is Create Light the turn that we play it. And it is a loss card, a burn card. It's 22 initiative, and on the bottom it's move 2. All adjacent enemies suffer 2 damage. So the top of this card I'm not a huge fan of. I think it's a fairly decent control kind of element, and with all of the pull that this character has, it's certainly going to be very easy for you to be able to get enemies to enter hexes adjacent to you. That shouldn't be a problem at all. But having 4 charges of disarm and building your character maybe around shield spikes where you actually want to be attacked does feel a little bit strange. Plus, disarm doesn't really do a good job against enemies that have non-attacking abilities, which, well, we'll be looking at the Red Guard in the kind of greater Gloomhaven sense when we're looking at regular Gloomhaven campaign and other enemies that you might face there. Obviously, disarm is not quite as good as stun. It's most of the time it's as good as stun, but sometimes in those small instances it's not quite. So it's quite an investment here to just burn, and you're going to have to use another card on top. As I said before, I'm not really a huge fan of these kind of one-time, perhaps burn a card, stun a bunch of stuff, or disarm a bunch of stuff. I really like my stuns and disarms and control elements in general to be very reusable. And this isn't reusable. Of course, it's only 4 charges. 4 charges is a lot, but if, for example, this card instead says disarm everything at range 3, you know, sort of similar to maybe a demolitionist card like Explode, or where you run in and Explosive Blitz, where you can run in through the door and stun everything within a certain range. If this just said disarm all enemies range 3 for a burn one-time effect, would I pick the card? Absolutely not. So I feel like this is weaker than that, but you do have a little bit more control to at least disarm the enemies that you choose by using your pull abilities. But you will have to use your pull abilities, or I guess hope that they actually walk towards you because they're melee enemies, or perhaps they're already disarmed and stuff like that. So it does kind of work quite nicely because, of course, it does give you that back-to-back control element, which is something that is a bit different to something like Explosive Blitz. Because, of course, the enemy is going to, have their turn, and they're going to go towards you, and then they're going to get disarmed, which means they're actually disarmed for kind of 2 rounds, right? So the idea here really is that they're disarmed for 2. If you manage to get them to walk in on their own turn. Of course, if you go the pull route of pulling them in, you're still only going to disarm them until the end of their next turn. However, if you're against a bunch of melee enemies, this does actually have a little bit more value because you can kind of disarm them for 2 rounds, the turn they move in, and then of course they'll be disarmed for the following round. So that's something that we shouldn't discount here, because that is some sort of nice use. However, some enemies that's not going to work with, and it's not always going to pan out that way. So I still feel like the top of this card is fairly weak overall, and is not really something that I'm particularly excited to use. 22 initiative is okay. I mean, with a burn like this, it doesn't really matter what the initiative is, because the chances are you'll probably be using the top of this when you get a spare moment between a room, so it doesn't really affect the top action. But the bottom action here is move 2. All adjacent enemies suffer 2 damage, which is basically a nice Rumbling Advance upgrade here. So Rumbling Advance by the Kragkar is move 2, do 1 damage to all enemies and allies that you are adjacent to. Create Earth. This is just move 2, all adjacent enemies suffer 2 damage. So it is a upgrade because it's extra damage, and it doesn't have that downside of damaging your allies, but it doesn't generate any elements. So this probably ends up being a little bit better, probably on balance, just because of the extra damage that it can do. And certainly if you were to move into, say, 3 or 4 enemies, that could be quite a lot of damage, right? It's actually pretty decent, and it is very usable. The only problem being that move 2, you might need to end up using a pair of boots to kind of make it a little bit bigger so you can really maximize that 2 damage. Or perhaps maybe you might just use this as a bottom and not even move at all. There's also a good use of just moving the previous turn, and then you literally just decline the move 2 action here and then just do 2 damage to all adjacent enemies. So, but you do have cards that already kind of do this, like the sickles kind of already do damage if you were going to play it in that way, right? So you've already got a little bit of a similar kind of effect here. So Fierce Brilliance to me is the top is pretty bad. The bottom I think is actually fairly decent to good, and I feel like it's not maybe a complete card, right? You've got quite a weak top and you've got a good to decent kind of bottom. I don't feel like that really kind of makes a outstanding card, or at least not something you're going to be super excited about as something like a level 6 card decision anyway. The other card we've got though is considerably better in my opinion, and something that we'll definitely be interested in using. So we've got Flying Sickle here. The top is attack 5, range 4, pull 3, create air. 91 initiative, and the bottom is attack 2, consume light to then be able to do a move 2 action, gain 1 XP, and attack 2 on the bottom there. So Flying Sickle top here is a huge attack. I mean, attack 5 is fantastic. Range 4 as well. I mean, you're going to be able to hit pretty much anything in the room. Like, nothing is safe from the Flying Sickle, and that big pull means you've got a really good opportunity here to be able to use traps to your advantage. Pull can sometimes be a little bit awkward when it's only like pull 1 or pull 2 and the range of your attack is 2 or 3. I mean, range 4, pull 3, you are easily going to be able to manipulate the room and being able to find a good position to pull an enemy through a trap. But also, you know, getting that enemy that is really tucked away at the back there, out of reach, bringing it really up and close, right into the middle of the room, perhaps for your allies to help attack as well, is going to be a huge deal. Yeah, Flying Sickle is an incredibly well-costed attack with just the attack 5, but the range 4 really puts it over the top, and the pull 3 as well is a really nice bonus. The create air element here as well is not something that we personally use, but it is something that the hatchet uses, so it has some synergy within the Jaws of the Lion characters as well, so that's really good. And certainly I think the Red Guards are really good at just kind of setting up stuff for his allies as well. He's a really good team player, is the Red Guard, with the element stuff and the pulling and the positioning of enemies. He's really good at kind of team play and manipulating the whole room, and with those early initiatives as well, sometimes that's quite easy to do as well. Speaking of initiatives, this is a 91, which is actually a benefit to this kind of card for us. We've got loads and loads of early initiatives already. We're pretty comfortable to be able to go early on this character, and if we really had any other decisions that we needed to make, we could always, you know, swap a couple of cards in to get some even earlier initiatives if we want. There are a few cards that we've already kind of gotten rid of that were decent initiatives, but I feel like you do need the odd late initiative, and that's exactly why Desert Knight has been kind of hanging back here too, is that sometimes it is just really nice to have a late initiative to play. Flying Sickle is a better late initiative card than something like Desert Knight, because of course with Desert Knight you probably want to go early to disarm something. Maybe not always, maybe you want to let the enemy come towards you and disarm them for the next turn, but a lot of the times people disarm kind of out of necessity rather than with forward planning. So Flying Sickle, though, the top of this ability works very well, because you could just go super late, let the enemies do their thing, and then just move into a nice advantageous position, do this huge big long attack, and you're ready to go early, but potentially for the next turn. So the bottom is attack 2 with that move 2 potentially, and the attack 2. This card is insanely good when we look at Strangling Chain. So in terms of combinations of cards, Strangling Chain on 19 initiative here. Let's say that we've got the fire, we're going to attack the enemy for 3, we're going to immobilize them, we're going to use the fire, so each time the target is attacked this round, it's now going to suffer 2 damage, and this is 2 separate attacks, so this would be 4 damage if you've managed to use the fire there on Strangling Chain. Such an insanely good like 2-card combo. Of course you're going to have to try and make sure that you are in the right position for it, but if you want to try and nuke down a boss, especially some of the early bosses that you come across in Jaws of the Lion that are really just like you need to do a lot of damage and you need to kind of do it quite quickly, then Flying Sickle, that's going to do the job for you. So this card just plays really, really well with the existing cards that we have. It's a very simple and easy card to play as well. You know, there's no kind of when do we play it? We're not quite sure. You know, what's the timing of this? Fierce Brilliance is like one of those cards where you're like, well, when do I burn it? Do I burn it at the end of the first room? Do I burn it, you know, in the last room? Do I burn it in the first room? Like when do I use it? Like it's a little bit awkward, the top burn here, but this has got 2 excellent halves of a card that considerably increase your damage potential and your kind of flexibility with your damage as well. So Flying Sickle is a very easy pick here at level 6 for me. So I just noticed when I was filming that the Sand Devil and the Desert Knight were not swapped over from the previous level, so apologies. I've now swapped them back over, so this should all make sense now and line up with our previous level. So Flying Sickle, what card do we want to get rid of to bring in Flying Sickle? I think it's always tough to choose which cards to get rid of on the red card in particular, because you got 10 cards and sometimes a few of those slots feel like they're just automatically taken up. You know, they're cards that you're always going to want to play with until you get maybe something that kind of upgrades that particular card in some way, or it's a strictly like for like style change, which makes just a lot of sense. So having to like have shield spikes, for example, just having to use that as a slot if you want to go for that shield spikes build, you know, and also some of these new cards that you bought in that are now going to be sort of essential. Shield of the Desert being a very essential card if you want to go down the shield spikes route for that big shield 3 turn potentially. Flame Shroud for being a big move with a nice shield. Swift Strength being a nice jump, move 2, jump and shield, right? So there's a lot of things here that kind of just have to sort of stay here. And one of the cards that I feel like is potentially for the cut here is Warrior of the Sun. I do feel though that this plays a kind of like a sneaky good role though sometimes, which is this whole shield and immobilize on the top can play really nicely with something like Swift Strength. If you really want to go in and you want to immobilize and double shield up, so you get the move to jump and shield, and then you use this one to shield, so you're already at 2 shield, and then of course you've got potentially your items on top that you can do. If you are really forcing shield spikes, then it's very difficult, I would say, to get rid of anything that has the word shield on it, because of course that's kind of the strategy that you're trying to go for, and certainly immobilizing enemies also stops them from running away from shield spikes, so that's also a big plus. However, if we want to talk just about kind of damage potential and what we can do, then Warrior of the Sun and Flying Sickle are fairly similar cards. You've got bottom attack here on Warrior of the Sun, and you've got a nice 2 bottom attacks, so it is a like-for-like upgrade in that sense on the bottom of the card. But I say the top is maybe a kind of a loss here. We're not really generating much in the way of light. That is another consideration here. This would be our only light generation card, so that would be basically no more light. So that is something to really consider. We're not going to be getting that attack 2, move 2, attack 2, although I don't really feel like that's super why you're playing the card anyway. But it is worth pointing out that if we get rid of this, we now we get rid of Warrior of the Sun, we now have absolutely no light generation whatsoever. I feel like this is a very, very tough one to figure out. Sometimes I might even consider swapping out something like Shield of the Desert here if you really don't want to go for that really big shield spikes turn. I mean, I like it because it kind of blows things out and it's kind of fun, and you just have that really nice turn where you have a stupid amount of shield and all the enemy attacks you. Like, it's fun. It really is fun to play that way. However, if you want to talk about a card that's just more usable, then Flying Sickle is way more usable than Shield of the Desert, which sometimes can just end up being a move 2 10 initiative at times. So that is something to consider. Sand Devil is also another card that potentially people might not want to play, just because of the fact that it is, you know, it is quite confusing at times, and how to get the most value out of Sand Devil isn't always apparent, and it sometimes can be a bit lacking. Like I've had scenarios before where I played Sand Devil early and it's just not felt very good. And I've also had scenarios where I played Sand Devil late and it feels like it wasn't on the board long enough to really warrant that burn, right? It's a really weird dynamic, Sand Devil. I feel like if you really want to go in on the whole ride the Sand Devil type play, you put it underneath you, then you could consider maybe getting rid of some of the things that, like, you could even maybe consider getting rid of Flame Shroud because you don't need that big move anymore, and perhaps then you can just use Flying Sickle for that. There's some really kind of interesting play with this card that I feel like it's really difficult to make a guide and specifically say, hey, you should swap out these cards, because some people will really enjoy playing with Sand Devil early and they will go hard on it and they will use it, and they'll get some really good value out of a scenario. But also, if you're playing solo and you're playing with, you know, 3 or 4 other mercenaries, trying to make this thing work really, really well and effectively, it's actually pretty difficult, and it takes a lot of your brain power away because there are so many little things that you can do with it. And yeah, I'm not so sure if this is, you know, a slam dunk card that I would be happy to say people should always play with. So you could consider getting rid of Sand Devil, but I mean, getting rid of like the level 5 for these characters always feels like a bit dodgy to me. You know, it feels like it's against the law or something. Like, it's not in the good spirit of the game. So it's really difficult with this character to make trims here, just because of how tight our deck is and how much we want different things for. I think for the purposes of this guide, I think I'm just going to probably get rid of Shield of the Desert here, just because I don't think like we want to go too hard maybe on the shield spikes. Like, we're not going to go for that big shield spikes turn now. Perhaps we're just going to try and kill things really effectively with Flying Sickle top and then the Flying Sickle bottom, maybe with Strangling Chain. We're going to go for, you know, we're going to maybe mix it up a little bit. I know this guide says we're really hard on shield spikes, but I also want to put a guide out here that maybe is a bit more flexible, and I want to discuss those different options as we go. So I think we're gonna drop Shield of the Desert here and going Flying Sickle. We are gonna have a card that is a strict upgrade to Shield of the Desert coming up fairly soon though, so that could be something. But I'm also very conscious that I don't want to get rid of all of the light generation in this build just because we have a couple of, you know, really nice things that we could potentially use the light generator for, you know, now, especially now that we've got this, we've got something else as well. It just feels a bit weird to not have any light generation at all. But in theory, Warrior of the Sun is probably the weaker card here. And yeah, or potentially Sand Devil if you really don't want to deal with the kind of complicated nature of trying to min-max the value out of this little guy. Okay, on to level 7. So at level 7 we have Vicious Ballet and we have Horns of the Beast. So Vicious Ballet is attack 3, consume fire, one adjacent ally may perform an attack 3 action, gain 1 XP. Consume light, one different adjacent ally may perform an attack 3 action. So we get to perform an attack 3, consume fire, an ally gets to attack 3, consume light, and a different one can do it. So potentially we could get 3 attacks of 3 off here. So that could be 9 damage. This is a non-burn melee attack. Kind of interesting here. The double consume though on the elements is really, really taxing for us. Like, we've not gone for a build that's going to have both of these elements up at all times. You know, we're going to have fire kicking around fairly regularly. But as we said before, we've only got 1 light generator at the moment kind of kicking around. So, well, is that really going to be enough? I don't know. So Vicious Ballet is, I feel like if you were to get the fire and light reliably and you were playing with 2 other melee characters in your party, I think that'll work quite well. The problem with the Jaws of the Lion, though, is that you really only have 1 other melee character, which is the Demolitionist, and the Demolitionist always likes to kind of run off and do her own thing. She wants to be next to obstacles, or she wants to be, you know, at the edges of a scenario next to walls. It's not often that she would find herself in a situation where you can perfectly kind of plan all of this out. However, I do feel like there's some space here for the Red Guard that if you were playing with like a Scoundrel, for example, and then there is more opportunities for you, right? So this is a card that I think if you could support it and obviously do it very regularly, it's very powerful. Getting a reusable 9 damage worth of, or 9 value worth of attacks off, right? And potentially with 3 draws, you could be looking at some really good numbers there, especially if you can get some strengthen going on as well to take even more advantage of this, or maybe something like the Mind's Weakness, for example, right, on the Mind Thief. So, you know, buffs and stuff like that can also really amp this damage up a little bit. But I feel like in the context of the Jaws of the Lion, I don't see that this happening super regularly, especially considering this character often wants to jump into the middle of a bunch of enemies, immobilize them, hang out, and, you know, shield spikes up. So often you want to be the focus, so you kind of like, you know, put yourself in harm's way, and your allies are like, you know, hanging around a little bit behind you or a little bit away from you while you sort of do your tanking thing. So yeah, on paper, actually an excellent ability. However, in practicality, I think that this is probably a little bit weak or will require quite a lot of setup, and maybe that's not worth it. Maybe that's a bit too hard. The bottom is, so it's 28 initiative. The bottom is 1 adjacent enemy suffers 1 damage. Move 2, 1 adjacent enemy suffers 1 damage. Move 2, 1 adjacent enemy suffers 1 damage. So potentially 3 damage to multiple different targets, or in fact just 1 if you wanted to just decline these moves and you wanted to just do it to the same target. It doesn't say it has to be a different target each time, so in theory you could just do 3 damage to 1 guy, stay in 1 spot, decline the moves if you wanted to. So that is something that you could do. This is a decent amount of damage, of course, and going through shields is a really big deal, and missing out on the retaliate as well, really good deal. There's a couple of scenarios where this is one scenario that I did, which was recently actually on the Deadly playthrough, which is Chaos Agents, I think it was called. That would help very much with one of the rooms in this particular scenario, but you also have lots of other ways of sort of dealing with that scenario as well. So there you've got a bag of tricks to be able to deal with the problems that scenario throws at you, but this would be one of the ways to deal with that. I don't think this is particularly bad, but is it as good as what we saw in Fierce Brilliance? I mean, probably not. I mean, you know, it's the difference between doing 3 to maybe 1 thing, or 2 to 1 and 1 to another, where you could just do 2 to everything. So really the bottom of Fierce Brilliance is kind of better, aside from the fact that, you know, this is kind of a move 4 as well. Like, even if you decline the damage, you just want to use this as a move 4. yeah, that's also kind of okay. So this is much more flexible than this, I guess, but it is kind of worse unless you are maybe playing in like, I don't know, maybe if you're playing like in a two-player situation, maybe the bottom of Vicious Ballet would be better. Of course, Fierce Brilliance had a terrible top, so this actually has a pretty usable top. So yeah, it's an improvement in general as a card, but I don't feel like this effect has really got much better here. It's really pretty much the same, and maybe in certain situations better, but also maybe in certain situations worse than previous cards like Fierce Brilliance. The other card is Horns of the Beast, and this was the card that I was alluding to when we were changing cards last time, that we have a strict upgrade here to Shield of the Desert. So this is attack 4, and we've got a little 2 hex pattern there, so two enemies next to each other in front of us or behind us or wherever they may be. Push 1, create fire, and get 1 XP. So that's a really nice amount of attack, right? If we compare these two things, right? So attack 4 on potentially 2 things, that's 8, right? Push, so could push an enemy into a trap. Also, this character, this character gets a lot of pull, but this is like the first time we really see push on this character, which is actually usually a little bit easier to use than pull, typically. But Horns of the Beast top, I mean, this is 4 times 2, so that's 8 damage, create fire, 1 XP. Vicious Ballet asks you to really go through some hoops here. This could potentially be 9, right? But you have to consume 2 elements in the process. I think it's really, I mean, it's like night and day, the top of this card compared to the top of this card, right? Yes, Vicious Ballet could be better, and yes, it's a bit more flexible because, of course, they don't have to be in this pattern right next to you. And possibly, your allies might have better attack modifier decks or buffs and things like that. So there are external circumstances where Vicious Ballet could be better. But realistically, in terms of value, Horns of the Beast top is way easier to play and just much better. So that does make Vicious Ballet a really hard sell, I think, because the top of this is just very efficient at what it does. And it's non-burn, create fire, 1 XP, so we've got a bit of element generation there too, which is always going to be really nice. 8 initiative on this card too, which is really, really good. This is one of our earliest initiatives that we're going to get as an opportunity to get, and pretty much cements us as being able to go before everybody else on our team and before most of the monsters as well, although there are some chaos demons that can go on 1 initiative in Jaws of the Lion, so bear in mind of that, but we might have a little solution to that coming up a bit later. The bottom of this is move 2, shield 3, consume light to get +1 shield. So this will be shield 4. This is a burn. So this is a strict upgrade to Shield of the Desert, and it is a big upgrade as well. Shield of the Desert was shield 3, obviously create 2 elements, 1 XP, but it did not have that move on it, which is really what makes it sometimes a little bit awkward. You really want to play it, but damn, it doesn't have that move, so you had to be in the right place, or you had to use the Void Warden to maybe play Signs of the Void to be able to move you, or give you some gifted movement as well with maybe Black Boon to be able to move yourself. So you had to either rely on another character to position you before the turn you wanted to play it, or you had to position yourself the previous turn. So it's always just maybe a little bit awkward on when you wanted to pull the trigger. Maybe you couldn't quite pull the trigger on it when you really, like, a great opportunity came up because you just hadn't planned for it. Well, Horns of the Beast bottom solves that problem for you. Here's a nice move action, sir, in shield 3, and potentially up to a shield 4 if you use light, which would be even better. So this is just a big upgrade. The top is a better version as well of Shield of the Desert, because of course this would require you to consume fire to get the 2 hex pattern, and you'd have to consume light to get the +1 attack and the push. So actually this is just straight up just much better because you don't have any of those requirements, right? So this is like if we hadn't already gotten rid of Shield of the Desert in our previous level, I feel like this would be the simplest swap of all time if you're still playing it, right? It's just a better card in all respects, including initiative, attack on the top, and the bottom shield actions. So yeah, for me at level 7, this is a very easy pick for Horns of the Beast because it's just a workhorse card, and it gives you back that big shield spikes turn if you want to play with it, and I do enjoy playing with it, like I've said before. So Horns of the Beast, easy pick for me. So like before, swapping out a card here is not going to be easy. We've got a very tight hand here, and we may even want to be doing some sideboarding. And honestly, I do feel like personal preference is going to come in a little bit here, where you might find that certain cards don't do quite enough for you and you want to keep swapping them out. But we've got a really big incentive here to keep some more light generation going. You could, in theory, do something like carry a mana potion just to create light for like this one card. I feel like that would be maybe fair. Or you could also maybe get your Void Warden or somebody else to be able to supply you with your light element as well. It just feels like we're carrying Warrior of the Sun just purely because of its light generation, and that to me is maybe not like the best use, really, right? So I think there's something to be said here about maybe swapping some of these cards around a little bit if you want. Now, in terms of other things we can get rid of here, we still need a little bit more fire generation. However, we have now got that in Horns of the Beast, right? So Flaming Sickle, it was nice because we could create fire on the top or on the bottom. Whereas now, with Horns of the Beast, we would only be able to do that if we were to use the top. But to be honest, that's really what we want to be doing. We want to probably be using the top most of the time. And as we know, the bottom is just a burn. So that's really not going to happen. So I feel like this is a fairly simple kind of pick. We do lose a little bit of range, so that is to be considered. But we're not really losing out on the fire generation too much, because of course we can only play one half of this card at a time anyway, even though it is very flexible. I feel like Horns of the Beast is a nice simple upgrade on Flaming Sickle here. And we still got Flying Sickle for that big range pull if we need. And of course we still got Swift Strength top if we need to do a little bit of a ranged pull. So yeah, I feel like that's a fairly simple change here, because Flaming Sickle, if you are playing like on the Shield Spikes kind of build and you are, you know, encouraging enemies to be next to you, you know, you're immobilizing them and you're trying to keep enemies close to you, then obviously a ranged attack here at range 2 is just a little bit weird. So yeah, I feel like even the bottom, when they're next to you doing that 1 damage, I feel like we've got other things that we can do now. We can probably do better than just 1 damage now. So yeah, Horns of the Beast is an easy pick. But to be honest, a lot of the time when I play on Deadly, I still have Shield of the Desert at this time. So I just sort of like interchange these two out as well. So you might also just find yourself in a situation where actually you just have Shield of the Desert and it's a like for like swap. So yeah. Okay, on to level 8. So the cards we have is Prismatic Sickle, and we have No Fear. So Prismatic Sickle first. This is a very interesting card that I think if you are playing potentially with a more kind of combo or very sort of team playery orientated party, this could be a very good pick for you. So attack for range 3, create any 3 elements. So you get 3 different elements and you can pick and choose which ones you'd like to create. You can choose whichever ones that you like. You can change each time that you play this card. I've seen sometimes people get a bit confused about how, you know, pick any element really works. But yeah, it really is just choose 3 different elements that you'd like, and you can set them to strong. You could also just set the same one, I believe, to strong if you wanted to, if you only wanted to change one, just so that you could have, you know, the maximum amounts of control over the situation. So for example, if you didn't want to make an element because everyone was using it, probably unlikely, but yeah, basically pick 3 elements and make them. So this makes you a really good team player. So you could essentially get an element for you, like you want to get that light, right? It's because you want to potentially do the bottom of Horns of the Beast next turn, so you could create light for yourself, you could create earth for your demolitionist, you could create air for your hatchet, or you could create dark for your Void Warden, or whatever it is that you really want to do, or ice for your Void Warden. So this is a very, very nice kind of like team play type card. The stats on it are not phenomenal, not at level 8, right? Attack 4, range 3. I mean, attack 3, range 3 is like the level 1 base, you know, attack kind of level, really. So this is obviously for a level 8 card, you know, it's actually seriously underperforming in terms of the attack value here. But the power level of just being able to make 3 elements for your team, that's actually really, really nice. And certainly if you're playing with some of the regular Gloomhaven characters alongside, so perhaps you're playing with triangles, for example, or if you're playing with another kind of element hungry character, then, or just an element hungry team in general, then you'll be able to do a lot of work here and really empower everybody nicely. So big combo piece here, potentially helping a lot of people out all at once. So yeah, I guess this is the only main concern for me about this is that it is kind of a bit weak generally in terms of the attack and the range, and it is a little bit vanilla. It's a little bit boring, but I don't think you can understate that it is actually very useful in certain party compositions, and some people will really enjoy playing with this because it will just empower themselves in a very clean way as well for future turns. If you wanted to do that double fire and light type turn using something like Vicious Ballet, for example, you've now got it, right? And you've got other cards that really want you to do the fire and the light together as well. You've got lots of other opportunities. For example, back even at level 1, you have Blade Dance, right? So you've got a few cards here that do actually, that this can help you out in a big way too. So the bottom is loot 2, and it is create any element as well. So just only 1 element this time rather than 3, but it is a non-burn loot 2. So very, very efficient at picking up a lot of change off of the floor. So good way to loot. However, at level 8, are you really that concerned about your looting cards? Probably not. You're really only concerned maybe about the element generation here. I think that's the big thing. The main thing to think about this, though, is that if you cannot perform the loot action, because there is no loot on the ground for you to get, you won't actually be able to create the element. You must do part of the action in order to be able to create the element on the bottom here. Creating the element is not the action. The action is loot 2, and a side effect of that is creating the element. So that's worth considering, because you know this bottom of this card won't always be create an element. It may actually be dead to you at some point where you can't actually use it the way that you intend to. So small rules things to think about there, but I think it's really worth mentioning, because I think if this was just a, you know, maybe it was like a move 3 create an element of your choice, I think that would be very, very powerful. But a loot 2 like that is less so. So just worth kind of pointing that out. The next card, though, is, I think, a bit better. This is still a good card, I think, but I think the next card that we're going to get to is really good. Well, a big reason of this is the number 1 written in the middle of this card. So 1 initiative means that you will always go first when you play this. There is Chaos Demons in the game that do have 1 initiative as well as an enemy. However, players always break ties, so if you are ever tied with a monster, you might have already noticed this or know this, but if you are ever tied initiative with a monster, you will always go first, because players break ties for initiative. So guaranteed go first turn. That's what No Fear is. The top of this is anytime you are attacked this round, gain shield X for the attack, where X is the number of enemies adjacent to you at the time of the attack, up to a maximum of 3. So that's actually, like, it's a little bit hard to maybe get your head around exactly when things happen, but essentially whenever somebody tries to attack you, you're then going to count up how many enemies are around you to a maximum of 3. You're going to gain that many shield. The enemy is going to perform their attack against you. Then you're going to resolve that attack, and then your shields are going to go away at the end of the attack, right? So it doesn't matter if the enemy attacking you is next to you, actually adding to the shield total or not. That is irrelevant. So you could have a ranged enemy attacking you. You could be surrounded by 3 kind of melee enemies that are next to you. So you're surrounded by 3 enemies, and there's a ranged enemy attacking you from the back. You're still going to gain that shield 3, because when that ranged enemy attacks, it's going to compare those 3 people are next to you, or count how many people are next to you, and you're going to get a maximum of 3 shield out of this. It goes kind of like without saying here that this is, you know, played at the right time. This is just shield 3 for the round, which, you know, we were burning cards for shield 3 for the round before. Not to mention that it's also a top action, so you can actually move and position yourself really, really nicely. So, you know, Swift Strength, for example, being able to jump into the middle, so you're definitely adjacent to 3, shield up, then you're going to get this to get an additional 3, so then you're sitting on 4 shield. Then you're going to be able to use your potentially your own armor items to get up to 5 shield. Like, it's going to get pretty crazy. And then you use Signs of the Void on the Void one, and you get 6 shield, right? This is the kind of card that really starts to make shield spikes sing. Like, this is the card that, oh man, like, you just prevent a lot of damage, an absolute boatload of damage. You soak so much damage through this, and then also you just deal that damage straight back again. It is a very powerful swing against the enemy to basically prevent them from taking an effective turn, essentially. So it's almost like a miss a go for the enemy in many ways, but you actually reflect that damage back. So it's a huge kind of swing here in effectiveness and in terms of tempo in the scenario to be able to do that. And No Fear is insanely good at doing that. I love this card. You know, this is the kind of card that if you've been playing Shield Spikes the whole time, you're kind of feeling like, well, I'm kind of getting there, but I don't feel like I'm doing like loads of damage with Shield Spikes. Like I'm doing a decent amount, but I don't feel like, apart from that one turn maybe when, you know, you've used your Shield of the Desert or now your Horns of the Beast, where you get one great turn out of it and that feels awesome. Well, No Fear allows you to get loads of awesome feeling turns. So yeah, really like this card with the Shield Spikes build. However, of course, if you aren't playing the Shield Spikes build, the top, it does do something. It does protect you, and it is a tanking ability, but it is significantly weaker, I would say, as an effect, because it's almost like it's not quite as good, obviously, as a prevent all damage type effect that some characters have had in the past, where you play a card and it just says prevent all damage this round, essentially. So, you know, nobody takes any damage this round. It's like a skip a go type thing. And skip a go can be good as long as you keep following it up with good stuff, but it is just treading water. Whereas obviously No Fear in combination with Shield Spikes isn't treading water, because you're shielding up and you're doing that damage back. So you're also progressing the scenario by killing enemies as well. So that's a really big deal. If you're not playing Shield Spikes, like I said, then maybe this does drop down a fair bit. However, 1 initiative is pretty nuts. So even if you're not potentially planning on playing the top of this, let's look at the bottom. But also, I mean, just as a move too, 1 initiative, I think a lot of people will play that regardless. So the bottom is the next 5 times an enemy enters a hex adjacent to you, perform a heal 3 self action. That's a lot of words for not a great effect, in my opinion. Similarly to how we had Fierce Brilliance here with the disarm, this is sort of like in a similar way, but this is a heal. There's a few problems with this. The main thing this is that it is a mandatory trigger. Okay, so the next 5 times an enemy enters a hex adjacent to you, you have to perform a heal 3 self action. This is not a may perform a heal 3. This is you have to. So if you were at full health because maybe your Void Wardens healed you up, or for whatever means, maybe you use potions or whatever it is that you've done, but maybe you seem to be at full health, or perhaps you've still got this going and you go into a new room and you've healed all the way up by long resting and getting healing, this will still trigger. So there's potential here that this heal could be wasted, right? The other thing is that this heal happens before the enemy attacks you, because of course it happens when they enter the hex, right? So they enter the hex, you do a heal 3, maybe you don't need it, then you get attacked and then you take some damage. Well, now you do need the heal, right? So the timing of this is a little bit awkward. Then I guess hopefully there's another enemy that then walks in, and then you can heal off the damage from the first enemy, but then the second enemy is going to deal damage to you. So you're still kind of down. You're down like 1 attack on the deal at all times, right? So it's almost like it would be much more effective if it just says the next 5 times you are attacked, do a heal 3 self action, or you take damage, you do a heal 3 self action. That I think would be much more useful, and could be quite good as well at removing things like wounds, because obviously a wound would be taking a damage and then you could heal it off. So that I think could be more of a better use, or that would make this effect a bit more usable. So, but as it is, I really don't feel like the bottom is particularly usable. It's really awkward. It's not a good burn. The top is insanely good with Shield Spikes. So for this build, it's an easy pick for me. I'm taking No Fear, and I think a lot of people will take this card even if they're not all in on Shield Spikes, because it is a bunch of shield, so it will really do a good job of just occasionally being like 1 round per room, just being able to say to your team, don't worry guys, I've got this, I'm going to go early, I'm going to draw all their fire, and I'll shield up for a crazy amount, and we'll survive for 1 round. You know, it buys a round for the team. So there's definitely some value to that in any build that you're going, but also that 1 initiative as just a move 2, just to ensure that you go first, especially if you are playing like, even if you're playing something like Desert Knight, right? Just a 1 initiative disarm 2, like disarm attack 2 disarm is going to be really good on 1 initiative, right? So there's a few other cards that are just, you really want to get it down. Like Strangling Chain is another card like that, right? Where it's like, Perhaps you really want to go early on your entire team, but you know you want to be the first person to go because you really want everybody to get the strangling chain extra damage triggers, right? So, you know, move 2 on no fear, just use it as a 1 initiative move 2, and then you get your strangling chain up, and then you're definitely going to get all of the value from it. So even when you're not really using shield spikes or tanking, there's still a lot of value to just having a 1 initiative move 2 in your hand. And it's a bit of a shame because I feel like Prismatic Sickle is actually a pretty decent card, and I feel like it will enable a lot of different builds. And if you are maybe going for an all-out damage build and you don't really care about tanking at all, and you don't really care about initiative, you know, you've got some good early initiatives already, but maybe you're just like, maybe you don't need a 1 initiative. Maybe you're quite happy to just, you know, have 6 as your best initiative, you know? If you're in that sort of situation and you want to combo off with other people, then Prismatic Sickle might be the choice. But for us, it's going to be No Fear. So another agonizing choice as to what card to get rid of here. It's never easy with this character. It's really not. I say it every time at the moment, but it does feel like when the higher levels come around, you really just... I mean, you're basically just trying to tailor what it is that you want to do. Like if you want to go shield spikes and you really want to make that work, then perhaps you try and keep a lot of the shield spikes cards, although sometimes they can be a little bit unreliable. Personally, I would be targeting Sand Devil as a potential move away here. There are definitely some really good things you want to do with this, and I said before, getting rid of the level 5 never feels good, but it can be very marginal at times, and especially if you're playing shield spikes. I mean, burning 2 cards and it's going to be quite a lot. And if I say burning Sand Devil potentially later in this scenario, just to kind of use that move 5 a little bit and maybe burn it slightly later in the scenario, then it just feels kind of underwhelming, and it's just get 2 XP, and it maybe does a few kind of cool turns, but it doesn't really kind of add up. I don't know what it is, but Sand Devil for me has just been a bit of an underperformer. I can understand that there are some really cool combos, and there definitely are scenarios where I can see Sand Devil doing some super good work. But if you want to talk about just cards that are in our hand, really, that don't do enough, I would say Sand Devil is really the hot target here at this point in time, because all of our other cards kind of do something or are needed. Like, I really don't want to get rid of Warrior of the Sun because it's our only light generation. You know, we're already a little bit light on the fire generation in certain elements of this build too. So Barbaric Instincts gives us fire, and so does Horns of the Beast, but we have a lot of fire consumption potentially that we need to do. You know, we've got Burn Away the Dark top here is maybe something that we would maybe consider doing at some point. Strangling Chain top here. We've got Flame Shroud bottom here. You know, we've got a lot of things. I mean, we're going to probably only pick 1 or 2 of these to do over a round of play, right? But you know, we're still quite hungry for elements, and although the perks will help a little bit with this, I think. So there's definitely some things we can do of flipping them, but I just feel like Sand Devil, it's mainly a move 5 on 55 initiative, which is not good, value for a card. Also considering that Flame Shroud really is our kind of go-to move card when we need to move a decent amount. So that usually is the play. And then we also just use Boots in combination with Swift Strength, another card that I think has also got some enhancement possibilities here. We might go up to a Shield 2 potentially here later on. So, you know, there is, probably don't want to get rid of this card either, especially if Shield Spikes is the plan. Sand Devil is the card that's got to go here. I don't want to force Sand Devil in here. And I feel like everybody should play with this card and should enjoy it and try it out. And maybe you'll find that you're really enjoying it. If you're only playing 1 character, you're just playing with a bunch of friends maybe, and you're playing a big multiplayer game, and you're only playing the Red Guard, and you have a lot of time to figure out Sand Devil and really make it work for you and be super valuable, then great. But for me, as someone who plays, you know, I'm playing 4 characters at the moment on Deadly, I just find that every single scenario that I've had this in so far, it's just been kind of meh. And I've never really managed to get it to be as cool as maybe other people have, or managed to have these cool situations. And it's kind of like looking at a card a little bit with rose-tinted goggles and potentially looking at a card saying, wow, this card has some really explosive potential to mess up the enemies and really screw around. But I don't know, I'm not completely sold on it. And I think I'd rather just have, you know, something like No Fear, which just gives me a bunch of shield potentially, you know, over Sand Devil. I'd happily play, you know, the bottom of this is a move 2 on 1 initiative, and I would happily play the top for the shielding. Whereas with Sand Devil, I feel like, well, it's going to be a move 5, and that's probably about it, and that's 55 initiative too. So yeah, it's just a little bit awkward. So I'm going to be dropping Sand Devil here purely to keep the build nice and tight with the different elements that we're making and keep ourselves a really nice kind of mix here of damage abilities and also with shield spike, stuff that plays really well with shield spike. So I want to just be a really nice kind of like hard on shield spikes, but also have a few kind of backup plans to just finish enemies off when we really want to too, when we don't have our shields. So yeah, I think Sand Devil is cute and everything. Don't think it really contributes quite enough. Okay, on to level 9. So at level 9, we have Soaring Shield and we have Honorable Fury. So Soaring Shield first. This is a move 3, jump on the top, attack 4, stun, target all adjacent enemies, fire, and 1 XP. So a big move and then a jump, move on the top of the card there too. So potentially we could use a bottom attack if we know we've got a couple of bottom attacks already, right? That potentially are open to us. So that's kind of cool. Obviously a big stun there as well, without you needing to actually use a warhammer. It's just got a warhammer built in, which is quite nice. I think this ability is, it's like a get out of jail style ability, and I don't mind these types of things, right? It is powerful, of course. It's a burn though, so you can only do it one time, but I do like these oh no, things have gone wrong, push a panic button type card, and this would do it. If you've got it in your hand and you're looking down, you're thinking, oh god guys, we really need to do something, these guys are going to kill us next turn, we need to pull something out of the bag. You can just say, hey guys, don't worry, I've got it, I'm going to move in, I'm going to do this. The all adjacent, of course, is maybe not ideal in certain situations if enemies are all spread out. And also, if you're playing maybe with lower player counts, if you're only playing with 2 mercenaries, then it's a little bit worse. These kind of target all type cards do get better at 3 and 4 player. The bottom here, though, I think is really where the power level of this is, especially if you're playing shield spikes. So move 3, jump, shield 2. We can consume air to get +1 shields. This is our first instance of us being able to actually use air, which we do generate through Flying Sickle, so we've already got that one sorted. So move 3, jump, shield 2. This is a strict upgrade, really, to Swift Strength, which is something that we've been playing all the way up to this time. So, I mean, this is basically Swift Strength 2.0, giving us an extra shield and an extra move as well, and potentially a 3rd shield if we can consume that air. And this is not a burn, so another really, really good ability. Yeah, this is what's not to like about the bottom of this card. It does absolutely everything. Not super glamorous, of course. It's not, I think No Fear is kind of like the glamorous shield spikes card, whereas Soaring Shield, though, if you can play both of these together, right? You could potentially get 6 just from these 2 cards together on 1 initiative. You could get 6 shield. I mean, wow, that's pretty crazy. And yeah, I think that's probably going to keep you safe. I think even on increased difficulty, if you've got a good amount of health as well, and you've got an iron helm to stop you from getting that crit drawn against you, maybe you've also got some armor as well already. So yeah, I think it'll be fine. I think it'll be pretty safe. So yeah, Soaring Shield is I think it's a very good card because you just got a workhorse bottom action, and then the top you've got just a get out of jail style effect that is powerful. And yeah, those are kind of nice to have as well in the bank just in case. The other card we've got is Honorable Fury, which is attack 5, range 2. We can consume fire to get +1 attack and +2 range. All enemies adjacent to the target suffer 1 damage. That would turn it into an attack 6, range 4, and then a little bit of splash damage, just like Massive Boulder. And consume light, add an additional attack, gain advantage, and muddle on the attack. So apply muddle. So that would then be an attack of 7 at range 4, doing 1 damage to everything. You get advantage, so good chance you could maybe draw yourself like a +2, hopefully. I guess at this point in time you're probably fishing for like a +2 or your ×2, of course. So you're looking at maybe upwards of about 9 damage here, and you apply muddle to the target, which can work quite nicely with shield spikes, funnily enough, because of course if they are muddled they'd have disadvantage. So if you were next to them, then that can work out. So you could hit them with the Honorable Fury, then move up to them, and they wouldn't try and avoid you. So if you have some shield through other means, then yeah, could work really well. In fact, actually would work quite well with Swift Strength. You could just hit them, then Swift Strength, and then they would take 1 damage, I guess, through the retaliate on shield spikes potentially. So Muddle is an effect that I think that the Red Guard actually uses quite a lot, because it kind of works in the same way as Immobilize, right? It's just about getting people to have disadvantage so that if they're ranged, they don't move away. The whole thing is to just immobilize and muddle or provide disadvantage to ranged enemies, essentially. That's the whole point of this. A decent attack here, very, very good attack. Does require quite a lot of setup though. You know, that fire and that light, like we said before with like Vicious Ballet, you know, it really has to make sense. I think Honorable Fury, it does. If you can just get I feel like most of the time, you're probably just going to be going for the fire is going to be there most of the time. Be able to get yourself that decent sort of 6 at range 4. That's pretty good. With the extra splash damage, I think that's very good. You can obviously get advantage through other means. So potentially through strengthen from your allies or whatever it is that you need. Yeah, at a bare minimum here, this is probably going to end up being something like an attack 6 range 4, which is very, very strong. And a reusable one at that. Not bad, but just, again, not particularly inspiring, not hugely inspiring. It's just a really good value damage card. And if you have taken cards like Prismatic Sickle in the past, then really getting these elements going should not be a problem for you. So I feel like when we get to this point at level 9, you're going to definitely take some previous card picks into consideration. And if Prismatic Sickle was a card that you picked at level 8, then I feel like level 9, it's pretty much a no-brainer for you. You should probably take Honorable Fury because you can just do so much damage with this top. 89 initiative is a good usable late initiative. Like we said, we kind of want a few of those. So, you know, that is something to consider. We had a lot of early initiatives. You know, however, if you did go for Prismatic Sickle, then you did miss out on the 1 initiative here. So, you know, you might not have quite as good an initiative as you want. But yeah, I think like 89 is an okay place for this kind of effect on the top. The bottom is Consume Light, potentially, to do a move 3 action, gain 1 XP. All adjacent enemies suffer 3 damage. So a upgrade really on Fierce Brilliance. However, you do need to have that element there to make it kind of an upgrade, if you like. I mean, I guess it's just a damage upgrade regardless, but sometimes you might not have that light element. So this could just, you know, it might not be quite as good as you'd hoped. And also a card like this, I think you're really focusing on the top most of the time, and then the bottom will be something that when you're against maybe living spirits, then you might consider using the bottom here because it'll be a bit more efficient, a bit better way of doing your damage. Honorable Fury, I think, is a very good package of value damage kind of effects, really. But Soaring Shield for me is just so cool to use shield spikes. There's just something I don't know, something incredible about how you can use enemies' damage against them. I don't know. There's some kind of like the feeling that you get, the rush that you get doing that with all the retaliate damage, just feels good. So, you know, I can attack a bunch of stuff. I can attack something for 7 any day of the week, but can I force an enemy to deal potentially 6 damage back to themselves? Plus, remember that you can obviously do this against any enemy that attacks you that was within the retaliate range. So potentially you could do this, get yourself 3 shield, do this, you're up to 6 shield. And if you can get like 3 enemies to just attack you melee when you have 6 shield and shield spikes, you know, that's crazy. That's 18 damage right there, just straight through. And the chances are as well, you know, if you've got other characters in your party that are cursing, or if you've managed to muddle them through other means or whatever, you've got Iron Helm, the chances are they can't really do much damage to you. You might be taking 2 or 3 damage as a bit of a trade there between those two. I mean, that's a good trade. So yeah, to me, this is a fairly easy pick for this particular build. However, I do feel like Honorable Fury, and in a good way, and it's nice that we actually have this at level 9 for once, because sometimes at level 9 it gets to a point where it's just like, this is clearly the better card. Regardless of what build you're playing, this is probably the better card and you should probably take it. Well, actually, I feel like the Red Guard actually does have 2, you know, reasonable picks here at level 9, and I could see people picking Honorable Fury if you really wanted to, if you're going down that create a bunch of elements, consume a bunch of elements to get a crazy amount of bonuses type kind of build and play style. So yeah, both of them good cards to me. I think Soaring Shield, you know, if you were on the fence here and you were kind of going some kind of hybrid build, then I felt like just the fact that it's a move 3 shield 2 with jump is probably going to be playable regardless of what you're doing too. And of course, the 11 initiative, if in doubt, take the early initiative, in my opinion. Yes, you can, there's a very good use of having late initiatives, but if you're not in the habit of actually, using that to your advantage, then really, like with new players, I advise you, generally speaking, just go as early as you can most of the time, because at least then you can respond to what the enemies are doing. And yeah, a very kind of like a common mistake to make as a new player is just to kind of not care about their initiative at all. Whereas if you just kind of focus on going early as much as possible, then I always feel like you'll have more impactful turns as a new player, and you'll feel like you're making progress. Whereas if you're just going your initiative all over the place, it can suck. So yeah, if in doubt, pick the lower initiative, because the chances are that will be more useful to you. Sword and shield, it is for me. So a nice simple swap out here for Swift Strength. I think, it's a straight upgrade here on the base card. If you are playing Jaws of the Lion without enhancements, I feel like this is obviously the easy pick. And for me on my Deadly, I am playing without enhancements for my first run through. So this would be the straight pick for me. This is a really nice one to put an extra shield on if you are playing with enhancements though. So this might actually be a move 2 shield 2, in which case this is not really any better. I mean, you might get to shield 3 of course, but you'd have to have that win there. So it might be fairly similar. So you might consider swapping out something else instead. You might even consider swapping out Flame Shroud here, because you're going to have fairly decent initiative anyway. And to be honest, move 3 versus move 4, this guy gives you 2 shield and this. So if you've actually enhanced Swift Strength, I would maybe consider actually swapping out Flame Shroud here instead. And it also means that you don't have the fire consume. Like, this can be a little bit greedy at times. So this is kind of better. In fact, actually, as I'm talking this through, I'm actually just completely changing my mind. So maybe we'll do that anyway for this. But I honestly feel like it's so close here between these two cards to swap out. I feel like you do whatever you need. And hopefully at this point in time as well, you do actually have a good pair of boots. If you've got, boots of striding, to be honest, will do you most of the way through anyway. But perhaps you've got even better boots here, so you don't really care so much about the move 4, the 4 value there on that card. Okay, so I will put up on screen now my final cards at level 9 for you tabletop players. So if you are playing the board game version, you can pause here if you'd like to see them all in the board game format. Okay, so let's talk about perks. The perks for the Red Guard are fairly straightforward, I found. You've got the classic perks here of consistency, removing your -1s. You've got refine here, which is a little bit different. You remove 1 -2, but you also remove 1 +1. So that's something to be considered. I think it's safe to always go consistency first on any character that does like to draw attack modifiers, right? So this guy definitely does that. One new perk down here that we have is Extreme Fortitude. Ignore negative item effects and add 2 +1 cards. So this is to enable you to be able to wear armor items from the base Gloomhaven game. This can be a really, really nice perk to pick up if you are planning on playing the base game as well. However, I do feel like the regular Jaws of the Lion armor that you get is pretty good. Adding shield 1 for the entire round is going to work really well with shield spikes if you are playing in 3 and 4 player, because the chances are there might be 4 or more enemies attacking you on that round. So that's equivalent to essentially getting shield 4 or 5. Yes, it's only for a round, but with it not being charge based like other armor that the main game has, that actually could be better value. However, if you are playing in 2 player, getting this perk, and then maybe once you start to get a little bit better than chainmail, maybe when you start getting some of the higher level armors unlocked, then perhaps this becomes a little bit better, because maybe there's only 2 or 3 enemies. So having something with 4 or 5 charges, for example, would be maybe a bit more beneficial. So I do feel like this perk is obviously nice. However, it's maybe not as nice as you might initially think. There are also some synergies with some other unlockable items, which we'll get into later. But this perk may seem like it suddenly unlocks this character, but actually in some ways it really doesn't change too much. And if you're playing with Jaws of the Lion, then you're not missing out. So if you're just playing the regular Jaws of the Lion game, or you're planning on just playing the Jaws of the Lion content, I don't feel like you're missing out too much by not getting this. So yeah, but worth pointing out, worth talking about, and it will be a fun way to build this character out with those extra items that you get in base Gloomhaven. So for me, we're just going to go with consistency. Next, we will go with refine. I think the benefit here of just removing the -2 is always good. realistically in Gloomhaven, you just want to, most of the time, draw the value that's written on the card. If I'm doing an attack 3 and I draw a +0 and I do 3 damage, usually you're pretty happy with that early on in the game. The problems usually come when you start drawing minuses on those attacks and you really needed that to kill something. The other benefit for doing Refine, of course, is that we can now also replace some more cards. So we start to just thin our deck a little bit as well, make our deck a little bit smaller, a little bit more tailored into what it is that we want to do. So we've got some nice things here, which we can replace +1s with +2s and create an element. I do think these are really nice with all of the elements kicking around. You have lots of ways you can create and consume fire and light. You know, there's lots of different things that this character wants to do. So it's an increase in damage, and it's giving you an element, and it's not changing the number of cards in your deck either. So I feel like that's a +2. Now, depending on which one you want to go for, I will probably go for light with this particular one because I'm actually not generating that much light. So I'd probably go for like light first and then probably do fire. But I think ultimately you do want both of these to try and have a nice way to maybe draw an additional element on your attacks. So after you've done both of these, or around this kind of time, you might have even save a perk here, but you're certainly going to be looking at dust here to be able to reliably draw those elements. Then you know that if you do an attack, hopefully attacking a few things with something like Burn Away the Dark, you know, you might be attacking multiple things, you know there's going to be a great chance that you can flip multiple elements potentially and get those +2s. But this will actually make you a very, very efficient damage dealing machine, having the ability to kind of draw, always draw kind of like good positive modifiers most of the time. So this is definitely worth considering. I would maybe also consider this a little bit earlier. You don't necessarily have to have done both of these. Perhaps you've only done one of them and then you maybe hit it, because what this does do is make your deck very, very thin, which means that you may miss more than you'd like. So there is also that kind of consideration. You're going to crit more, but also you might miss more as well, right? That's kind of like the thing with having a small deck. And this isn't a character that really strengthens much, so that is something to consider. But I think like dust is probably around about now is a good time, or maybe somewhere in between these kind of perks as well. That's the kind of range you're going to be using it for. Now on this save, I've only got the perks all the way up to level 9. I don't have any battle goal perks unlocked. So there's a good chance here that you have a few more perks to spend. Hopefully you've maybe got another sort of, you've either maxed out the number of perks that you can get, or you can get a little bit more. So I've actually only got one perk available here because, to say, this is just a level 9 character without any additional battle goals completed, just so that I could do this guide. So this is what I would probably go for, and around about this kind of order. So I feel like Gouge is just a really good pick here, right? It's gonna increase your damage output as well, keeping the deck the same size. I think that's really, really useful. So that's a fairly easy pick for me. I think it's basically increasing your damage, right, in every way. If you really wanted to keep your deck lean and mean, you could go for Refrain as well here, which is going to be increasing your damage a little bit and getting rid of that last +0, which means that you're pretty much always going to be drawing +1, right? You've only got 2 cards in there that aren't very good for you, which is the -1 and the miss. So you've actually got a really, really good aggressive deck for attacking things, which is going to be very good with Burn Away the Dark. You can have some nice flips with Burn Away the Dark top. So I felt like Refrain is a good one to go for here. Also, Bulwark, of course, it's a +1 and it's a shield one, so works really nicely with shield spikes. However, chances are that, you know, you might do a little bit of extra damage here or there with the shield spikes. I don't know if this is like super good. I feel like what I would prefer to do is play my shields. And the thing is that the turns where you're playing shields, you're not attacking, right? So this does give you a little bit of incremental shield on the turns when you're not. But on those turns, you're probably aggressively trying to kill things. So I don't really know. Like this perk feels like, and on the surface, seems like it should be really good for this character, right? Because, yeah, it works really well with shield spikes. It's going to be extra damage. However, a lot of the turns when we go hard on shield spikes, when we kind of go in, we're not actually attacking, because we play No Fear, for example, as the top. It doesn't have an attack on it, right? So there's no way for us to draw this shield. The turns that we draw this shield are on the turns where we're aggressive and we're attacking, and those aren't the turns we typically want to get hit sometimes, right? So I don't know. It's just an observation that I've had, that I do think it's a good perk, but maybe it just doesn't quite fit into the tempo of the play of the character. I don't know. you can take it. It's absolutely no reason not to take it. And certainly if you're just playing a little bit more of a frontliner and you're not so hard on shield spikes, some incremental shield is quite good. I also think Blazing Light here, just being able to create both your elements. Certainly if you are going on the big element generation sort of path with Prismatic Sickle at the end there and stuff like that, obviously creating these two elements on a flip would be very good for you, because you're going to have lots of cards that could use both of them, or maybe you have a top action that uses one and you have a bottom action that uses the other. If you're going really, really hard on elements, this is the one for you. And there certainly is a build somewhere for this character in there where you can go basically create fire and light every single turn, or try to, and consume it every single turn. There's something there for sure. So Blazing Light is another pretty good one. And the other thing is, we've always talked a little bit about Extreme Fortitude. Not a perk that I would take if you're playing Jaws of the Lion exclusively. However, if you're playing high level Prosperity regular Gloomhaven, then I think it's something you should consider. Okay, on to items. So as with items before, I will do a spoiler-free section here for people who just want to know kind of starting items that aren't going to spoil anything that you unlock later on in the game, and you can just use that when you discover it, if you discover it and you find it to be useful for your character. So for head slot item, you definitely want Iron Helm. There's no other helmet that really you should be considering here. Just being able to prevent the enemy from getting that ×2 flip against you, which can really derail a tank's plan at times. You're planning on tanking for your team, and then they draw that ×2, and then if they're at the bottom of the deck, they shuffle, and then inevitably they draw it again. This works against blesses as well, and there are a lot of mechanics that add blesses in Jaws of the Lion content, right? I'm looking at you, Void Warden. So this is a must-have card, because otherwise you really are going to be derailed very, very quickly from the tanking plan, especially if you play at high levels of difficulty. So let's just forget about that RNG. It doesn't exist for us anymore. We're always going to get the beneficial flip when a ×2 is flipped, right? That's just really what you want to do. Prevent the RNG of the game screwing you and causing you to lose. So Iron Helm, easy pick. For body item, you're really only looking at chain armor, and I feel like chain armor is the best one for most people to look at early on. I don't think like you want to use the base Gloomhaven starting armors at all with this character, because getting that shield 1 for the entire round, as long as of course you can go early in the round, which, let's be honest, you've got lots of early initiatives, that shouldn't be too hard. This will potentially work out as being like a shield 4 or 5 or however much, depending on how many enemies there are, for an entire round, which is much better value than the charge-based armors that base Gloomhaven has at this point in time. As things progress, things might change for you, but to start with, I feel like that is fair. So chain armor, very easy. And to be honest, I will play with chain armor even all the way up to high levels with this character, because it's just so useful when you're playing 3 and 4 characters. For your hand item, you are probably going to be looking at a shield maybe at some point. Heated shield is a bit of a disappointment really, because of the fact that it's only shield 1 for 1 attack. So with shield spikes, it's like 1 additional damage. So you're going to tank an additional point of damage and deal an additional damage back with shield spikes, but then it's gone. So shield spikes does really want round-long shield effects, which you're going to get from your cards or from the chain armor, right? So I do find this to be a little bit underwhelming on this character, specifically because you really focused on that shield spike. So it's much better to have shielding on your cards. Warhammer, though, is a great item to pick up, because you do have some nice early game combos with it. You do have Twirling Stabs, I think it is, your level 1 card, which does allow you to stun everything around you. So that's a really good opening combo, potentially. But you've also got Burn Away the Dark, which is a card that you get a little bit later on, which is even better than that. So Warhammer is a nice, safe pick. It's probably not going to be a priority kind of item for you. Definitely these top 2 items are, your head and your body items are much more of a priority to begin with. But Warhammer, as long as by the time you get away to like Burn Away the Dark sort of time, I feel like Warhammer is a great item to pick up. So for legs, you're really just going to want plus movement boots. So if you're playing regular Jaws of the Lion, you're just playing the tabletop version, weather boots is all you're going to probably have access to. So weather boots will have to do. Next, you've got boots of striding is obviously the upgrade and something that you really want to go for. So just plus movement boost is all you've got. You got swift strength for the jump. So really, you're probably going to be using the movement boots with swift strength. That's probably what's going to end up happening. But yeah, Just plus movement boots, you'll be absolutely fine. For your small items, really, it's just going to be your standard healing potions and stamina potions. I think you'll probably benefit maybe a little bit more from having the healing potion early games. The problem with stamina potion is that quite often the cards that you want a stamina potion back are actually round long effects. So, you know, you want to play something like Swift Strength, but of course it's going to stay in front of you for the round. I make a lot of mistakes with this character, actually, just because I play a card and it feels great, and then I want a stamina potion and get it back and use it next turn, and forget that it's a round long effect. Strangling Chain is another great example of a card like this, because it actually stays out to remind you that the extra damage for essentially the other enemies that attack. So I do feel like Stamina Potion can be a little bit awkward at times with this character with all of your round-based effects, but you know, I feel like Healing Potion first, then my Stamina Potion, or either or, depending on which you want. But that's all you really need to worry about in terms of early game items, and certainly beginning items. Okay, so now we're going to progress onto some spoiler items. This will include spoilers from sort of higher level Jaws of the Lion stuff, but also high level Gloomhaven Prosperity stuff from the standard edition of the game as well. So bear that in mind as we go into the spoiler section of items. So for your head slot item, honestly, Iron Helm is the best head slot item in the game for you. It kind of sucks, and I do feel like it's a little bit of a maybe a mistake on behalf of Gloomhaven for having an item like this, because for tanks, there really isn't anything better that you really want to use. There are a few things that, of course, can be kind of okay, like you're immune to poison and wound, right? There are things like this that can be quite a nice protective charm. You know, Horn Helm, you are somebody who can move quite a lot, and you could potentially, you know, get an additional +1 on one of your melee attacks. Like, you know, these things are cute and they do work, and things can happen. You know, Eagle Eye Goggles, again, like sometimes you have a couple of big AoE attacks that you can do. You attack a lot of things like Burn Away the Dark, but realistically, if you want to be that reliable tank for your team, let's just ignore the RNG of you getting blesses and ×2s drawn against you, and let's rock an Iron Helm. For body item, it gets a little bit awkward because, again, I feel like chain armor is really, really good, and I don't feel like there's many things that you really need to swap into it. Things like bladed armor seem to be okay, but the fact that it's only shield 2 for 1 attack, this armor I think is better in 2-player because you're going to be attacked less, so the kind of round based effect is not quite as good. And of course, if you do have shield spikes with this, it's actually going to be 4 damage back to the attacker, because it's going to be 2 damage for the extra shield, and it's going to be 2 for that extra 2 damage from the blades. So bladed armor can be quite nice if you're playing in 2-player, for sure. If you are playing base Gloomhaven items, I feel like stuff like chainmail isn't really worth it, because of course it's only 3 charges, and chain armor and chainmail, very similar sounding items, but chainmail I don't think is really worth it, because you'd think you'd much rather just have the shield 1 for the entire rest of the round rather than 3 charges, and you have to take the perk. That's the other thing, right? You kind of have to take the perk, otherwise this is even worse. So yeah, not really something that you would consider without the perk. However, when you do start to get to things like plate mail, that can actually start to maybe persist between multiple rounds, right? This actually could have enough charges to sustain you for maybe 2 rounds, or at least maybe 1.5 rounds, right? So, you know, is it likely that you're going to be attacked by more than 5 enemies in a round? Maybe not so much. So yeah, I feel like certain items like this get a little bit better. Split mail again, maybe not. I mean, really, it's funny that chain mail is just as good as it is, and honestly, I'm not quite sure if these will really be worth it, especially if you're playing with a high player count. Playing 2-player though, I feel like these items do come into play, because absolutely you're not going to have 5 enemies on the board, most likely, so it will persist between rounds. But again, you're going to need that perk if you want to do so. For your hand items, I do feel like you can pretty much stick with Warhammer, you know, as a safe pick. But there are obviously some extra things you could go for. Ancient Drill being quite nice, potentially additional +2 attack and pierce on some of those big AoEs that you've got. Maybe the stun's a little bit nicer though for your team, depending on how you want to do it. Of course, you're going to be looking at shielding items, and there are a couple of good ones, right? You got Tower Shield, you've got Wall Shield as well, which could be quite funny. Gain shield 4 and then potentially reflect all that 4 onto the enemy as well. So that's got some really nice kind of use. You know, even the bombs for this character are not too bad. With Flying Sickle, you've got some big attacks. And especially if you're going down the route of using all of those elements, so you're trying to maybe go for a bit more on the element thing, and you've got a little bit more of a damage focused build or a ranged damage focused build, then volatile bomb, unstable explosives can be quite nice. Even something like throwing hammer, the new throwing hammer item, which will allow you to add stun to a single ranged attack, can be quite nice as well. So there are definitely some things you can do here. Spike shield is probably always, it is generally always my favorite of the kind of shield items in the game, because it gives you shield 1 and retaliate 2, so that's extra. This is essentially 3 damage, right, for this character if you have shield spikes on. So I mean, how can you have a character with a card like shield spikes and not use the item spike shield? It feels like it's a must. You must sort of do this. So this would be my favorite shielding item for this character, just because it's cheap, it's easy, it's reliable, it only uses 1 slot. You could also use a tower shield if you like. The good thing about spike shield is that there's a little bit more kind of versatility in it. I feel like, you know, tower shield's okay too, so potentially you might end up running something like spike shield, tower shield, like a double shield build if you really wanted to go hard on shield spikes. Otherwise, I think Warhammer, you know, just to keep that 1-turn combo for safety purposes is always really, really good. Or of course you could maybe look at the bombs, or potentially if you want to go even more damage, ancient drill. You know, you've got like barbed axe as well is something that's possible as well. So there's a few little things that you can do, but realistically you're probably not going to do it. Halberd might be interesting if you get really high level, but honestly I think where I would be at is I'd probably be at spike shield plus something else, maybe like tower shield, or I'll probably end up sticking with the Warhammer and spending the money on enhancements or something else. So with your leg items, really, say plus movement boots is really where you're going to end up being most of the time with this character. It really just helps to add on to those move and jumps and move and shield abilities that you have. However, what can be kind of spicy is steel sabatons on this character. It's an unlockable item. If you move 1 or fewer hexes on your turn, gain shield 1 for the round. So potential way for you to actually just keep gaining shield for free, really. And this is not a tap action or anything. This is just a passive sort of effect that this item has for you. You are probably going to be moving more than 1 hex a lot of the time though, so it won't always trigger. And perhaps the loss of having a really nice big move potentially with a pair of plus movement boots is a real loss. But I feel like if you're a pretty confident player and you keep maybe you keep Sand Devil in for a little bit longer so that you keep that move 5, maybe you don't need to worry so much about having the plus movement boots for that big turn. Maybe you can get by without it. So yeah, steel sabatons is an item that I'm more curious on. Wing shoes is something that you could maybe consider. Then you wouldn't have to necessarily play some of the move jumps, but I feel like you've got enough jump kind of inherently in the cards that you have that you don't really need to like worry about sourcing jump elsewhere. But yeah, it could be a slightly different build. If you went this way, you could certainly make a few different decisions on a few cards potentially. And then, of course, something that combines all of it, like jet boots or rocket boots, will, of course, as well be quite good, because this just combines everything all together. Maybe not quite as good as boots of striding if you're playing it with the jump, of course, but there's also something to be considered. But I'll be honest, you're probably going to end up like end game item is probably boots of sprinting, boots of dashing for this character, with maybe steel sabatons for the spicy extra shield. So on small items, I don't have everything unlocked here on this particular save, but we can go through everything. Of course, major stams, major healing in particular will be very good for you, so make sure you keep an eye out for that. That goes without saying. Ring of Brutality is very, very good on this character, same as it's very, very good on the hatchet. This will allow you to play your shield spikes on the very first turn of the game without having to waste a card kind of playing it, right? One of the downsides of having a card that you always want to play and you always want to play it on the first round is you kind of have to give up the first round. You say, right, I'm sorry guys, this round I'm setting up. If you get an item like Ring of Brutality, then you can actually play that top action with impunity and not have to worry about it. Also, you could maybe get Ring of Haste, which will allow you to play shield spikes plus something else, and then potentially you could play like a big, you could play like a move and shield or something. So you could get more than 1 shield, for example, in that round too. So I think both of these items have some play, but I think Ring of Brutality really is the one to just be able to play shield spikes without having to worry about wasting a turn doing so. Moon Earring, going to be really, really good on refreshing any items that you have. So it refreshes your chain armor, so it gives you another way of doing some more damage through that. Refreshes your boots, which is also going to be really, really good. And of course, any hand items, if you have gone for shield hand items, that will also refresh that. Same with Star Earring as well. Get cards back, get healed, refresh your items. It's always going to be really, really good. One item that is not here, which I think we can talk a little bit about, is Steel Ring. So Steel Ring, discard it, lose it. Essentially, it is a burn. It's a one-time use for shield 4 on that attack. So there's another way there that potentially you could get some extra shield, which I think is kind of nice. It's like a really kind of cute idea to be able to do that. And yeah, you're basically going to be looking for the most kind of broken things. Mana potions might be something that you might consider as well, because you obviously are quite element intensive at times. So you might consider doing that so you can set something up. Also, because you go early a lot of the time, you can potentially set your allies up as well. So there's another consideration for you being the mana potion user in the party. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. There's not really anything else that I would say is like a super slam dunk item. I don't think you really care about summons. You do have some, you know, potentially you could use something like a doom powder or a stun powder that can give you some nice situational things. I don't feel like you really want to go for like the power potions, but I guess if you wanted a really big burn away the dark, then potentially you could consider power potions as well. But that does seem like it's going very all in on one card. See, Ring of Restoration is okay as well, being able to heal yourself. Ring of Strength, you know, to gain strengthen. I don't think that this is particularly worth it. Second Chance Ring, of course, is also good. So most of the broken items, funnily enough, work very well with this character. But I felt like if I had to focus on getting one item, I would probably be the Ring of Brutality, just because I want that free play of shield spikes. I don't want to be having to throw away the first turn, or maybe you don't play it on the first turn, but maybe you play it a little bit later. But you know, you're going to be throwing away a turn at some point to play shield spikes. So all right, let's have a quick look at enhancements. So as I think I've said before, I'm not really playing enhancements on my personal Jaws of the Lion save, and enhancements for these characters were kind of added, like they put the dots on the cards, but because there was no enhancement system actually within Jaws of the Lion, there was no way to actually buy enhancements if you're playing that game. So if you are playing, or you want to be playing true to that experience, then you shouldn't really be playing with enhancements. However, lots of people do like to, and it's a good fun part of the game. So I think Swift Strength, extra shield here is going to be really, really useful. Definitely something that you're going to want to do. It's a card that stays with you the entire time that you're playing, so makes a lot of sense, and immediately makes your shield spikes a little bit better for the turn that you want to play it. Flame Shroud has a little bit of extra movement potential here, or in theory you could add the jump here for 50 gold, which I think is not a bad add actually, to be able to give you even more flexibility for your movement. I think that is not a bad add at all. It's something that you could potentially do. Other cards that you might consider doing are things like Barbaric Instincts, could also be increased to a shield, but that's a huge amount of shield, 125 gold. That's going to cost a lot. You might consider upgrading some of the range or the damage and stuff on some of these guys. So you got additional damage here on like Flaming Sickle, for example. Blinding Sickle, you got additional damage, or maybe like a poison or a wound or something that you could maybe stick on there. You've got Twirling Stabs, of course. Possibly a really expensive one, but if you were to get Wound on this, or if you put Disarm on this, they have 300 gold. I mean, that's pretty broken. That'll be very, very powerful. Really, really powerful. Too powerful, potentially, I would argue. You've got a few other little things like Strangling Chain can be increased a little bit. The move on Strangling Chain could be increased, so you could put Jump on here. Really, it's going to be +1s, and that's about it. You know, you haven't got a huge amount here. Like I said, because enhancements weren't really a baked-in part of Jaws of the Lion, and because of the learnings that they've had of where to put enhancements and where not to put enhancement dots, these characters were definitely reined in a little bit more in terms of enhancements. So you're mainly just going to be increasing the values here, and maybe the odd little effect here or there if you can afford it when you get all of that gold. So yeah, so it's a very brief guide, but honestly I feel like the one that most people should focus on getting early is just go on Swift Strength and try and get an additional shield here. It's expensive, it's 100 gold, but I feel like this would instantly improve your character in many ways if you've got a boatload of gold to spend. So that's a wrap for the Redguard video. It's always really difficult to do a guide on a character like this that actually has so many different options. And even when I do videos that are several hours long and I talk in length about characters, I always feel like I haven't touched upon everything sometimes with these characters, because I know that lots of people have nice little cute combos that they've worked out with different characters, with different items, and this character is very tricksy and has different things you can do. And I think you can pretty much make an argument for any of the cards at each of the level up. You know, someone can make a really good valid argument to say, I think it should be this card instead of this card, and yeah, I mean, there's just so many opportunities to do so with this character. So you can see why it's a fan favorite, and it's really good to have a kind of more interesting tank to play with, right? Because sometimes with the tanks that are in base Gloomhaven, they're a little bit vanilla. You know, they're good at what they do, but they're very vanilla. Whereas this character's got lots of little tricks, lots of little things you can do, things you could maybe do a bit differently than other people if you wanted to. And that's cool. And certainly the way that they interact with their allies as well, much more than some of the other tanking characters. It's like, don't worry guys, I'm going to move forward and shield. You know, sometimes, you know, that's all they do. Whereas this character can actually interact a lot with their buddies, with all of the elements that they're making. You know, they can definitely provide fodder for their teammates as well, and have some really good interactions with some of the base Gloomhaven unlockable characters as well. Particularly the music note, I think it's going to have great interaction with this character, and triangles too, potentially, with all of those elements kicking around. So yeah, it's just going to be a really fun character, I think, to play in base Gloomhaven as well. Probably more so than any of the other characters, at least because it fills a role that I think is definitely underserved in the base game. A big shout out to all of my supporters on Twitch and on Patreon, with the Patreon people coming up on screen now. I really appreciate it. If you would like to get early access to some of my videos, then head over to patreon.com/mandatoryquest. It really helps me out in helping to support the content that I make, and maybe one day I'll be able to make this full time, and I'd really appreciate that. So that's awesome. And a big thank you to Mike Kira, my legendary supporter. Thanks, dude. You're awesome. I really appreciate it. And of course, what's an outro without talking about twitch.tv/mandatoryquest, where I stream every Monday, Wednesday, and Sunday. So come hang out and maybe catch me playing some Gloomhaven live. Okay, then it's that time of the video for me to say thank you all so much for watching. I will catch you in the next video. Bye.
I think so. Yeah.
Oh,
Scout
that's the blessing from Jeff.
Yeah.
That's the blessing from.
Isaac, at this point, can we get your approval to add an additional attack modifier deck for allies in the digital version?